Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where gold-plated toilet seats are just the beginning. Yeah, you heard that right, gold seat for your very historically constipated behind. You've just woken up as a Gilded Age billionaire. It's the 1890s and you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's currently 11:12 PM in Charleston, South Carolina. Shout out to Amara who commented from there last week. What time is it where you are? And what city are you listening from tonight? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a bed that feels like it was made of clouds, but overachieving ones, the kind that went to Yale. Your eyes flutter open to sunlight trickling through layers of lace curtains, filtering in a soft, buttery glow. It smells like beeswax polish, imported lavender soap, and the faintest suggestion of old money. Like, really old. Like owns a chunk of Pittsburgh old. You're lying beneath gold-leafed sheets. Not gold-coloured, actual gold leaf embedded in the embroidered trim like a flex no one asked for but everyone has to acknowledge. The bed frame is some absurd French Rococo monstrosity carved by hand and imported across an ocean, just because your decorator said it made us Tinman. That statement, apparently, is, I could pay off your student loans with one headboard. You blink a few times and sit up slowly. The bed is easily big enough for 6 people, a dog, and maybe a small diplomatic summit. You're wearing a silk nightshirt that whispers when you move, the kind of whisper that says, this was stitched by nuns in an Austrian convent just for you. There's a moment half awake when you think, did I inherit something? Did someone drop me into Downton Abbey but make it American? You swing your feet over the side and feel your toes press into a Persian rug so soft it feels illegal. You wiggle your feet deeper into it, mildly concerned you might sink straight through the floorboards and vanish forever. Then a knock. Soft. 3 times. Just enough authority to remind you that you're in charge. But someone else runs your life now. Sir, your bath is drawn, comes the voice. British accent, of course. Because if you're going to be obscenely rich, your butler must have an accent. It's practically a law. You stand, slowly, cautiously, because there's still a sliver of doubt in your mind. Could be a dream, could be an extremely weird VR experience. But as you pad barefoot across the polished floor, passing a giant oil portrait of you, wearing a fur-trimmed cape and holding a falcon for some reason, you accept it. You are no longer whoever you were yesterday. You are him. You push open the double doors to your bathroom and it's ridiculous. The room is the size of a modern New York studio apartment. The floors are Carrara marble, shot through with veins of rose gold. There are multiple sinks, each a different stone, and a bathtub deep enough to drown a medium-sized horse. Crystal decanters line the edge, filled with bath oils that smell like orange blossoms and generational trauma. And there it is, the throne, a toilet, porcelain, definitely European, with a gold-plated seat, polished to a gleam. No one talks about it, of course. It's not done to discuss toilet seats, even golden ones, but it's there, gilded, shining softly in the early light like some absurd relic of over-engineered luxury. You sit, you must, and yes, it's cold, surprisingly cold. You make a mental note to order heated versions installed in your Newport mansion later. Behind you, a servant in white gloves clears his throat gently. Would you prefer rosewater or lemon blossom for your rinse basin this morning, sir? You try to answer with grace, but all that comes out is a semi-confused, sure. He nods as if you've just quoted Cicero and steps away to prepare your scented washcloths. You glance around at the details, the tiny ivory tilework, the gaslit sconces, the imported Venetian mirror that adds 5 inches to your perceived height. Every object in this room costs more than a public school teacher's annual salary, and it's only Tuesday. Eventually you return to the bedroom. Now dressed, someone selected an impeccably tailored morning coat, high-starched collar, and a cravat tied so elaborately it could be a form of communication. Your reflection in the full-length mirror shows a man who could easily bankrupt an entire state and still afford dinner. You stare at yourself, not quite recognizing the eyes. Then a thought hits you. Who am I supposed to be today? Your name is something unnecessarily long, triple-barreled, something like Archibald D. Wexley Stewart IV. You own railroads, and steel mills, and newspapers that tell the masses how grateful they should be to have jobs that slowly kill them. You're not the richest man in the world, but you're invited to his parties. It's almost laughable how far removed you are from the idea of normal. Your house has 14 chimneys, 5 pianos, and a hidden servant staircase network so complex it might be used for time travel. Your dog wears a cashmere vest in the winter and has its own portrait in the hall. And your breakfast room, that's not your dining room mind you, has 4 chandeliers and a ceiling mural featuring Roman gods who all look suspiciously like you. The best part? None of this is strange to anyone else. This is just Tuesday morning in the Gilded Age. But there's a small voice in your head already whispering so. How long can this last? Spoiler alert, not forever. But for now, the golden toilet seat is warm from the sun, your cravat is just the right level of pretentious, and you're ready to go see what it means to live at the very, very top. Welcome to your new reality. Your footsteps echo down the long parquet hallway as your butler, whose name might be Gregory or possibly Thaddeus, leads you toward the breakfast room. You try not to look directly at the wall-mounted taxidermy bear wearing a monocle. It has a weird energy, but everything in this place does. One doesn't become a Gilded Age billionaire by decorating with restraint. The breakfast room isn't just a room, it's a manifesto. Sunlight spills through stained glass windows depicting scenes from Greek mythology, which is bold considering you're about to eat eggs. There's a fireplace big enough to roast an entire ox, even though the room is already uncomfortably warm thanks to overzealous coal heating. The table is long, mahogany song, inlaid with mother of pearl and set for a feast just for you, and sitting in the middle of that decadence is breakfast. Not cereal, not toast, but an event. There are oysters on ice, smoked trout on toast points. A silver cloche is lifted to reveal a mountain of soft scrambled eggs cooked with cream and what tastes like truffle, but you don't remember requesting any of it. A footman, a word that still makes you laugh internally, pours your coffee with the solemn precision of a Vatican ritual. Your cup is bone china rimmed in gold. You sip and find it smooth, velvety, and aggressively expensive. As you eat, a newspaper is unfolded beside you. Today's headlines: some minor war overseas, several workers dead in a textile mill fire, and a front-page photo of you. Apparently you just donated $100,000 to the Society for the Refinement of the Arts and Other Agreeable Things, whatever that is. There's a grainy sketch of you holding a ceremonial spade at the groundbreaking of a building you didn't even know was happening. Being rich, it seems, comes with its own form of amnesia. You do things, or someone does them for you, then your name goes on it, and you nod in approval. A framed letter sits propped against the salt cellar, embossed with the royal seal of some minor European prince. You're invited to his summer palace to discuss a shared enthusiasm for strategic finance. You suspect it's code for I want a loan and your yacht is nicer than mine. But for now, your attention is caught by something else, the bathroom you just left. Because, let's be honest, we have to talk more about that golden toilet seat. You ask the butler, quietly of course, because even opulent billionaires have their shame, is the commode standard? He doesn't blink. It was custom fitted for your comfort, sir, designed in Paris. The seat is 24-carat gold leaf over hammered copper, commissioned by your late uncle, who found porcelain of vulgar material. Of course he did. Now here's a curious little historical fact. Indoor plumbing in the 1890s was a luxury reserved for the ultra-wealthy. Only about 10% of homes in New York had flushing toilets at this time, and heated water, practically sorcery. But your bathroom doesn't just have a toilet. It has an entire suite. The air is perfumed, the plumbing is hidden behind embossed mahogany panels. And that golden toilet seat? That's not a gag, it's an icon of excess. Something only the richest and most ironic of tycoons would have dared to commission. A fringe detail. Rumour has it one of the Vanderbilts had a diamond-encrusted chamber pot, used exclusively on Tuesdays. No one's ever confirmed it, but the world wants to believe. As you sip your coffee, staring out at your manicured courtyard, which currently features a gardener trimming hedges into the shape of Napoleonic battle scenes, you start to wonder, do other billionaires live like this? The answer: some did, some didn't. There were actually factions among the wealthy, old money versus new. The Astors and the Schermerhorns look down on industrial titans like yourself, men who earned their wealth through smog and sweat instead of inheritance and marriage. And while you've clearly tried to mimic aristocratic tastes, your version is a little extra, a little too much French marble, too many gold fixtures, too many peacocks wandering the conservatory like unpaid extras in an opera. That's the thing about the Gilded Age. It wasn't golden through and through, it was gilded. Thin gold over something more chaotic underneath. You glance back at the newspaper. There's a headline buried on page 3 about a labour strike in Chicago. Some steel mill workers walked out demanding 10-hour days and bathroom breaks that didn't involve buckets. You feel a flicker of, what? Guilt? Curiosity? Probably heartburn from the oysters? You fold the paper and stand, time to get dressed properly. Because today you're touring your empire. Back in your dressing room, which is approximately the size of a Barnes & Noble, you're faced with a closet that resembles a military archive. Dozens of suits in wool, silk, and some strange imported cashmere blend hang in perfect formation. A valet approaches, already holding up a dove grey ensemble with a matching waistcoat and a hat that could block out the sun. He clears his throat. Today's engagements include a visit to the Carnegie Foundry, lunch at Delmonico's, and your standing invitation to the Baccarat table at the Metropolitan Club should you wish to unwind. You do wish. But first, more buttons than any human should ever deal with. As you stand still and allow someone else to dress you like a life-size porcelain doll, you wonder again, how did you get here? Not just here in the dreamlike sense, but here in the historical sense. What made men like you rise to the top while so many others were crushed under factory wheels? There's no easy answer. Some say it was genius, others say ruthlessness. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle. You had capital, timing, and probably an unhealthy disregard for antitrust laws, but that's a worry for another day. Now, fully dressed and polished within an inch of your life, you descend the grand staircase like a villain in a 3-act play. The world is waiting, your carriage is ready, and your empire of steel, smoke and spectacle is humming in the distance. You pause one last time at the bottom of the stairs. Your butler bows. Your dog barks once in approval. A maid scurries past carrying a tray of something that looks suspiciously like candied violets. And you smile, because in this world, even your bathroom makes headlines. You step outside and the air hits you like a warm, coal-scented sigh. It's New York in the 1890s, alive, a little grimy, and absolutely convinced of its own importance. Your carriage waits out front, a glossy black marvel with the velvet interiors and golden lanterns flickering even in daylight. The driver tips his hat. The horses, 4 of them, because 2 is for commoners, snort with drama as if they too know they belong to a billionaire. Sliding into the carriage, you settle onto the cushions like a sultan. The city moves around you in a blur of cobblestones, newsboys, horse dung and gas lamps. You pass Central Park, freshly manicured for the upper crust, and glance at the people beyond your carriage window. Everyone seems in motion, working, shouting, selling, surviving, except you. You glide. Your first stop is your personal railway station. Yes, personal. Not just a station, an entire platform and waiting room reserved solely for you and your impossibly curated entourage. Think Persian rugs, high-backed leather chairs, a fireplace because of course, and a breakfast buffet that you politely decline because you just had 2 servings of butter-soaked trout 20 minutes ago. Your private rail car is already hitched and steaming gently, waiting to whisk you off to your steel empire in Pittsburgh. It's not just a train car, it's a rolling palace. The floors are teak, the curtains are damask, the dining area has a chandelier. A small chandelier, but still a thing that hangs from the ceiling and sparkles unnecessarily while you're on a moving train. As you board, a valet hands you a small crystal decanter of brandy in case of early thirst. You nod as if that's normal. The interior of your railcar smells like tobacco, polish, and generational denial. You wander into the lounge, which features overstuffed armchairs, a walnut bar, and shelves stacked with books you'll never read but keep for aesthetic dominance. A portrait of your father hangs above the fireplace. He's scowling as always, probably judging your choice of lapel pin. And here's a historical detail to chew on as your train pulls away from the station. Luxury railcars like yours actually existed. They were the ultimate status symbol, used by men like George Pullman and Cornelius Vanderbilt. These weren't just for travel, they were mobile expressions of wealth, complete with bedrooms, bath facilities, and even pianos in some cases. Yes, moving pianos, because nothing says I own 14 tenements like playing Brahms while crossing Pennsylvania. You settle into an armchair, sip your brandy and glance out the window. The city fades into countryside. The train sways gently. It feels almost peaceful, until your secretary appears, holding a ledger thick enough to stop a bullet. "Sir," he begins, adjusting his pince-nez, "I've organised the mill reports. You'll want to review the labour numbers before reaching the site." You raise an eyebrow. "Is there unrest?" He hesitates. "There's noise. Some talk of a walkout, demands for shorter shifts, a few agitators handing out pamphlets." You sip your brandy again, slower this time. There it is, the other side of the coin. See, being a Gilded Age billionaire isn't just about peacocks and monogrammed soup bowls. You own steel mills, massive fire-breathing monsters that churn out beams and rails and money. But they eat people, metaphorically, mostly, and those people are starting to push back. It's a known thing in your world, workers are getting louder. The Haymarket affair wasn't that long ago. Labour unions are crawling out of the woodwork, whispering about rights and dignity and other ideas that, frankly, make dinner parties awkward. You nod to your secretary. "We'll address it." He bows and retreats, no doubt to write an unnecessarily formal letter to someone you'll forget about by Thursday. Your train speeds on, slicing through green fields and soot-stained towns. Smokestacks begin to dot the horizon. Your smokestacks. You know this area by heart. The company town you built from nothing. Rows of narrow houses. A school painted cheerful yellow. Factory looming over everything like a steel deity. When the train slows, a small crowd has gathered. Local managers, foremen, and a few curious townsfolk, some excited, others wary. Children wave, you step off the train and adjust your gloves, projecting the confidence of man who once evicted an entire neighbourhood to make space for a new shipping depot. Your mill looms behind them. It roars with the sound of molten metal and labour. Sparks fly like fireworks from inside its cavernous heart. It's beautiful in a terrifying, apocalyptic kind of way, and it's all yours. As you tour the site, managers rush to point out production increases and innovations. There's a new machine that can roll beams faster. A furnace redesigned for efficiency. One foreman brags that last week, a crew broke all the records. 18-hour shifts, minimal accidents. He says it like he deserves a medal. You nod, but your mind drifts. You're not blind to what this all costs. In fact, here's a quirky little footnote for you. Some Gilded Age tycoons had viewing balconies built into their factories, not for safety oversight, but so they could host guests and watch the workers like a zoo attraction. With canapes. You haven't gone that far. Yet. But as you gaze out at the floor, you see the toll. Faces burned by heat, hands calloused beyond recognition. A teenager pulling slag from the edge of the furnace, barely older than your youngest son. And that whisper again in your head, how long can this last? You meet with your plant manager in a small office that smells like ink and sweat. He slides a list across the desk. Names of employees caught organising a meeting. You glance over it. Fire them, you ask? He shrugs. Or reassign them to night shifts? They'll take the hint. And here's where the scholarly debate creeps in. Were Gilded Age billionaires truly heartless industrialists? Or were they just products of their time, caught in a game of economic survival with rules they didn't write? You stare at the list a little longer, then fold it, pocket it, and tell the manager you'll consider options. It's easier than outright deciding. You exit the office into fresh air, or what counts as fresh, filtered through ash and ambition. Your train is being readied again. You walk slowly, passing a row of workers on break. Some nod respectfully, one glares, another doesn't look up at all. You step back into your rail car, feeling the weight of it, the luxury, the detachment, the quiet truth that this empire of fire and gold doesn't run on ingenuity alone, it runs on bones. As the train pulls away, you pour another brandy. You're not sure if it's to celebrate or to forget. The train carries you back to the city. Its rhythmic clatter a sort of lullaby for the morally conflicted. You sit in your lounge chair, one foot crossed over the other, watching Pennsylvania blur by through leaded glass windows. The pastoral calm outside, the cows, the windmills, the scattered picket fences, feels laughably disconnected from the infernal roar of your mills. Somewhere between the coal smoke and the cream velvet upholstery of your railcar, you drift into a shallow, brandy-scented nap. When you wake, you're back in New York, and your carriage is waiting. It's only noon. Back home? Of course not. You're headed to your afternoon appointment, which, as your secretary reminds you with a tone of mild dread, is a charity luncheon uptown, a gathering of New York's finest, diamond-draped ladies of leisure and aggressively perfumed dowagers who all believe doing good means hosting events where the hors d'oeuvres cost more than the cause. Your carriage pulls up to a sandstone mansion with 12 Corinthian columns too many. You're greeted by liveried footmen who smell faintly of rosewater and anxious ambition. Inside, the drawing room is a masterclass in overcompensation. Crystal chandeliers, brocade wallpaper, enough floral arrangements to choke a horse. And there they are, the society women, in structured gowns with corsets cinched so tight they look ready to pass out at any moment. One is holding a Pomeranian dressed in a tiny satin cape. You don't ask why, you're handed a champagne flute and guided toward a table where the conversation is already bubbling. "Did you hear what Mrs. Astor did here at the last cotillion?" someone whispers, as though national secrets were being traded. You nod thoughtfully, pretending you care, while mentally ranking everyone's hats from tasteful peacock to auditory weapon. This luncheon is for the Ladies' Benevolent Society for Destitute Foundlings, which you're pretty sure is a fancy way of saying orphans. A string quartet plays softly in the background while a maid in livery refills your glass with something you suspect is elderflower cordial. The main course arrives, something involving quail eggs and regret, and a woman with alarming feathers in her hat launches into a speech. She uses words like uplift, moral improvement, and godly obligation. But you know the truth? None of them have ever been within sniffing distance of a foundling. They're not here to help. They're here to be seen helping. Helping is aesthetic. You play your part, of course. When your name is called to make a few remarks, you rise with the practiced grace of a man who owns 5 newspapers and therefore controls public perception like a puppeteer. "My dear ladies," you begin, voice warm, humble brag laced. We live in a time of enormous change. Progress surges forward, and yet it is our duty to ensure that in our climb we do not forget those left behind. Polite applause. One woman actually dabs her eye. Another fan flutters herself into mild hysteria. You drop an envelope on the table. Inside is a cheque large enough to earn you 3 uncomfortable curtsies and a permanent place on someone's donor wall. It's not a real sacrifice. That cheque is a rounding error in your ledgers. But it buys you social armour. It keeps the knives sheathed for now. And here's your historical moment of the day. Philanthropy during the Gilded Age was booming, but it was far from altruistic. Men like Carnegie and Rockefeller gave away millions, sometimes out of guilt, often out of PR strategy. Carnegie even wrote a whole essay, The Gospel of Wealth, arguing that the rich had a moral obligation to give back, as long as they controlled how. Charity was less about kindness and more about legacy management. You finish your speech, clink glasses with a woman who smells aggressively of lilac, and step away to the smoking room. It's mostly men there, bankers, cousins of industrialists, and one vaguely foreign aristocrat whose monocle might actually be a magnifying glass glued to his face. You nod. They nod. Everyone pretends to like each other, while silently assessing who's about to buy up half of Lower Manhattan. You chat about tariffs. You pretend to care about opera season. You laugh, too loudly, when someone makes a joke about factory strikes being just part of the weather. And for a moment, you blend in. One more suit. One more powerful man holding a glass of amber liquor and avoiding realer conversations. A curious detail someone once told you surfaces. During this time, some socialites used charity events to launder reputations, want to bury a scandal, host a fundraiser, want to edge out a rival, out-donate her. It's all a game, and you're getting very, very good at it. Eventually you slip away from the luncheon, a polite excuse about afternoon meetings, and you're free. Back in your carriage, you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The city outside your window feels closer now, dirtier, louder. The contrast is blinding. You spot a child selling newspapers on the corner, barefoot, shouting headlines about a trolley strike. You toss him a coin that makes his eyes widen, and for a moment you feel something like satisfaction, until you remember you own part of that trolley company. So, yeah, bit awkward. You arrive home just as the light is starting to shift. The sky turns orange, and your mansion glows like a cathedral to poor impulse control. Inside, a tray of letters awaits, one from JP Morgan, another from someone in Washington with a name that sounds like a law firm, and 3 from charities thanking you for your continued commitment to moral civilization. You toss them onto your desk like playing cards, and here's the debate lurking in the background. Were these gestures, these donations, these speeches, acts of atonement, or just investments in reputation? Scholars still argue. Some see industrialists as proto-philanthropists laying the groundwork for the modern non-profit sector. Others see them as image-obsessed capitalists throwing breadcrumbs to avoid revolt. You don't know where you fall yet, but you do know your name will be printed in tomorrow's paper under the headline, Steel Tycoon Champions Orphan Aid. And that, for now, is worth more than any gilded toilet seat. The envelope waiting on your nightstand tonight is heavy. Real paper, thick enough to resist folding. Your initials are monogrammed on the front in dark green wax, which means it's from your head architect. You open it lazily, still in your evening coat, boots half unlaced, while your valet hovers nearby, pretending not to watch you struggle with the letter opener. The contents are as absurd as expected, a revised floor plan for the west wing of your mansion. Because apparently 70 rooms aren't enough. You flip through it while sipping something aged and French. The architect's sketches include a third drawing room, a winter conservatory with retractable stained glass ceiling, and, because why not, a replica of a Roman bath beneath the library. He's also added what he calls a whimsy suite, which seems to be a turreted tower accessed only by ladder, with no purpose other than to exist. The more you read, the more you're impressed by how creatively rich people waste space. You toss the plans onto a side table and decide it's time to really see your home. Not just the parts you visit, your private rooms, the main hall, the breakfast salon, but the rest. The strange corners, the secrets. You wander barefoot, trailing your fingers along silk wallpaper and passing oil paintings of people who look vaguely like you but angrier. The gas sconces flicker with a sleepy hiss, casting soft, golden light down the long corridors. You enter the ballroom first. It smells faintly of wood polish and old music. The chandeliers are low and grand, their crystals gently tinkling in the breeze from a cracked window. The floor is so shiny you catch a glimpse of yourself, hair tousled, expression amused as you pass. The room has hosted presidents, foreign dignitaries. One time a lion. Yes, a lion. That's your quirky detail for tonight. The Gilded Age elite were obsessed with exoticism. Live animals at parties weren't uncommon. Monkeys in waistcoats, parrots that insulted guests in 3 languages, even a baby elephant once reportedly paraded through a debutante ball. You never personally requested the lion. It was a gift, from a Russian Grand Duke, for your birthday. Next, you step into the map room, because of course you have one. A full wall of global maps lines the shelves, some of them centuries old, most of them wrong. There's a spinning globe the size of a dinner table. You give it a lazy twirl. It spins so fast that the British Empire blurs into one long white streak. Appropriate. Deeper into the house, things get stranger. You find a hallway where the portraits have eyes that follow you just a little too well. A door you've never opened leads to a music room, where an automatic piano is gently playing Chopin all by itself, the keys clicking eerily in the empty space. And then there's the mirror maze. Yes, you forgot you even had it. The Hall of Mirrors was a gift to your second wife, not the one you're currently married to, but the one who fled to Vienna after the incident with the soprano. No one talks about it now. The mirror maze is windowless, filled with antique Venetian glass that warps your reflection into ghostly doppelgangers. As you walk through it, barefoot and mildly tipsy, you feel like you're drifting through some kind of rich person purgatory. Is this what legacy looks like? Endless reflections, none quite real? Eventually you emerge into the indoor aviary. Yes, that's real too. Birds flutter above your head. Toucans, finches, something that might be a small hawk. The smell is mossy, humid, and slightly overwhelming. A gardener, who's clearly been hiding in a corner to avoid interaction, bows as you pass, holding a bucket of suspiciously tropical feed. "Good evening, sir," he says. You nod, brushing bird feathers from your sleeve and move on. The strangest room, though, is the doll room. You forgot it existed. You want to forget it exists, but there it is, at the end of a narrow hallway behind a door painted with cherubs that have definitely seen things. Inside are dozens of antique porcelain dolls in tiny chairs, all staring at the same spot on the floor. No one ever explains why. You once hosted a psychic from New Orleans who refused to enter the room. You believe she used the phrase portal to Victorian nightmares, and yet you keep it. Because that's what Gilded Age wealth is about, really. Keeping things, rooms, objects, history, legacy. Sometimes you wonder if you're curating a life or just hoarding one. There's a debate among architectural historians about homes like yours. Were they sincere attempts at beauty, or just massive insecure ego flexes? The answer is probably both. On paper, your house is a masterpiece. In practice, it's a maze of indulgence. It says, "Look at everything I've done," while whispering, "Please never ask me why." You head toward the western sunroom. This one you do use. It overlooks your garden, where gas lamps flicker among hedges cut into elaborate shapes. Tonight, they're sculpted into the likenesses of famous philosophers. You sip your drink, staring down Plato's foliage-carved nose, and think, is this real wisdom or just really aggressive landscaping? Outside, the city twinkles. You see the glow of street lamps. The occasional streetcar rumbles by, and in the distance, across the river, smoke rises from the factories. Your factories. You wonder what those workers are eating right now, if they're warm, if their families are alright. Then you shrug, because what can you really do tonight from here? The house creaks faintly. A wind whistles through a barely sealed window. Somewhere, a grandfather clock chimes 9 times, slow and solemn. You suddenly feel the size of the place, the weight of it. It's not a home, it's a monument. One you live inside like a well-dressed ghost. You call for your valet, it's time for dinner. And tomorrow you'll tour your train again, or the yacht, or maybe just the doll room if you're feeling brave. Because when your house has a million secrets, you might never truly finish exploring it. The clink of silverware against fine bone china echoes softly in the dining room. A cavernous space that could seat 30, but tonight hosts just you and the massive portrait of your great-grandfather glaring down from above the fireplace like a judgmental gargoyle in epaulettes. Your dinner arrives on a series of gilded platters, each course announced with the quiet dignity of a man who spent the last 30 years doing nothing but telling other people when to eat. "Consommé à la royale," your butler says, placing the first dish down like it's a Fabergé egg. You nod, spoon in hand, staring into what is essentially fancy broth with floating bits of gold leaf. That's not an exaggeration. You are, quite literally, drinking gold. Because somewhere along the line, someone decided opulence should extend into your digestive tract. You make it through the first 3 courses with admirable stamina. Soup, duck à l'orange, and something suspiciously gelatinous that you pretend to enjoy out of politeness. The kitchen staff, you're told, are studied under a Parisian chef who once cooked for Queen Victoria's cousin, which somehow feels like the culinary equivalent of name-dropping. But you're not staying in tonight. Not when your train is ready and waiting. After a brisk change of clothes, tonight's look: a midnight blue velvet dinner jacket, cream waistcoat, shoes so polished you could blind someone with a glance. You make your way to your private depot once again. The carriage is ready, naturally, and this time it's fitted with extra lanterns, because where you're headed tonight, the tracks wind through darkness. You're off to Chicago. Why? Because Chicago in the Gilded Age is the second beating heart of your industrial empire. It's the place where your freight lines converge. Your warehouses sprawl, and your name is whispered with both awe and resentment. Your train, a different one tonight, newer, sleeker, impossibly unnecessary, is gleaming under the gaslights. This one's fitted with etched glass doors and a velvet-lined poker room that seats 8. You don't gamble, not really, but it's good for business. It puts people at ease, lets them think you're human. You step aboard and the train hums softly with anticipation, like a beast preparing for a midnight run. As the city lights fade behind you, you walk the length of your railcar, past the smoking lounge, the dining nook, and the miniature bar stocked with French liquors and American arrogance. A steward hands you a warm compress for your hands. You accept it, mostly because refusing feels rude. Here's your historical fact for the evening. Pullman cars like yours weren't just a luxury, they were a revolution. Before them, train travel was a misery of soot and stiff benches. Pullman cars brought bedding, service, elegance, but they also came with controversy. The workers who maintained these opulent cars were overwhelmingly black men, many of them formerly enslaved. They were paid poorly, treated worse, and given names like George by default, regardless of their real names, an erasure that would, decades later, ignite a union movement. But that's not on your mind tonight. Not yet. The whistle screams, the train lurches forward. The night stretches out ahead of you like velvet unrolling. You spend the first leg of the journey reviewing papers, a new shipping contract, breakdown of coal prices. A list of men who are either trying to become your friends or your enemies, and sometimes both. You sip cognac and half listen to your secretary reading minutes from the last board meeting, but your mind drifts. It always does on trains. The rhythm, the motion, the gentle sway of power set in motion. It lulls you. It makes you reflective, dangerous even. Eventually you retire to your sleeping quarters. Not a berth, mind you, but an actual room. Mahogany panelled, with a canopy bed, brocade curtains, and a bell you can ring if you need anything at all. You rarely do, except tonight, when you lie in bed staring up at the ceiling and feel something strange. Emptiness, not sadness, just hollowness, like your bed's too big, like your railcar's too quiet, like your life, gilded and grand though it may be, is starting to feel like a very well-decorated echo chamber. You get up. You throw a robe over your silk pyjamas and pad barefoot to the observation deck at the rear of the train. The wind bites at your face, the stars above are endless. The rails behind you stretch like a silver thread unravelling into infinity. For a moment, you let it all fall away. The meetings, the parties, the mirrors, the birds, even the golden toilet seat. It's just you and the night and the sound of iron on iron. Then a voice behind you. "Sir?" You turn. It's a Sergio, young, sharp-eyed, polite to the point of invisibility. "Just air," you say. He nods, then hesitates. "May I say something, sir?" You pause. This doesn't happen. This isn't allowed. But tonight you say, "Go on." He fidgets with his gloves. "This train's the finest I've seen, but sometimes I wonder how many folks it rolled over to get built." You blink. You weren't expecting philosophy. "A lot of people never got back up after that," he adds softly, then bows and disappears before you can answer. You stand there for a long time, and here's your scholarly debate. Were Gilded Age titans visionaries or villains? Did they build a modern world, or just build walls between themselves and everyone else? Historians still can't agree, and maybe that's the point. Eventually you go back inside, you lie down again. The bed feels a little smaller now, or maybe you just feel slightly larger somehow, expanded by a truth you're not quite ready to admit. As you drift to sleep, the train keeps moving. Through the night, through the age, through the story. Because this is what being a Gilded Age billionaire is, a journey you can't get off of, even if you wanted to. You wake to the sound of a whistle, long and low, echoing through the steel belly of your private railcar. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, just a pale smudge of light creeping over the horizon like it's apologising for interrupting. You're already dressed by the time that the train slows to a halt, not out of enthusiasm, but because someone laid your morning clothes across the foot of your bed with the sort of passive-aggressive precision that suggests they will be deeply disappointed if you stay in pyjamas. The train creaks to a stop on the outskirts of Chicago. Your second city. Your steel city. It smells like ash and progress. You step down from the railcar, swore, your polished shoes clicking against the stone platform as smoke from a nearby foundry rolls in like fog, thick and sour on the tongue. This isn't the champagne-soaked glamour of New York. This is muscle, grit, and molten ambition. Your factory manager is already waiting, moustache waxed to violent perfection, holding a clipboard like it's a weapon. He speaks quickly, and you listen with half an ear while your car, or rather one of the 5 you keep in the city, pulls around to take you to the site. You've come to inspect the lifeblood of your empire, the steelworks, and it's every bit as dramatic as you'd hope. Imagine a cathedral built by Vulcan himself. Towering furnaces belching fire into a sky that gave up trying to be blue. Men move like shadows between glowing vats, coated in soot, eyes squinting through the smoke. Sparks fly in bursts so bright they leave ghost trails on your vision. The whole place thrums with heat and danger, a machine too big to stop and too angry to run without sacrifice. You walk through the heart of it, escorted by your manager and 2 assistants who try not to look like bodyguards. The workers glance up as you pass, some nod, some keep their heads down. One older man wipes sweat from his brow with a rag that looks like it's older than the Republic. You nod back because it feels expected. Here's your historical fact for today. By the 1890s, the United States was producing more steel than Britain. Steel was the future. Steel was railroads, bridges, skyscrapers. And your name was printed on a good chunk of it. You're not just a tycoon. You're part of the literal backbone of the modern world. But you didn't get here by being gentle. At one point, you stop to watch a massive crucible tip its glowing contents into a mould. The light reflects off your waistcoat buttons. The roar is deafening. One misstep and someone could vanish into that pit. No recovery, no remains, just a puff of steam and some awkward paperwork. You pretend not to notice that the walkway beneath you is stained. You wonder if it's rust. You hope it's rust. Your manager gestures to a new rolling machine, boasting about its increased output. It shaves hours off production. He seems pleased. You say something vaguely congratulatory and make a note to review the cost later. You're always calculating, even now, even here. Then, as you're being shown the mould yard, it happens. A shout. A sudden sharp yell cuts through the industrial din. People scatter. You hear metal crash, someone curse, and when you round the corner, you see a man lying on the ground, his leg twisted under a collapsed set of tongs, his face pale and sweating. No one moves at first. Then slowly the foreman barks orders, and a stretcher is brought in. Should have seen the chain, someone mutters. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows he won't be working again. Not here. Maybe not anywhere. You stand there, silent, watching as the man is carried off. His eyes meet yours just for a second, and there's something in that look that chills you more than the air ever could. Not blame, not even fear, just resignation. You clear your throat. See to his family, you say to your manager. He nods. It's a practiced nod, a gesture that means yes, a stipend will be arranged, or maybe they'll be relocated to a less visible housing block. You won't ask twice. And here's your fringe detail. Some Gilded Age tycoons kept injury books, ledgers that recorded accidents and settlements like grocery lists. There were formulas. A lost hand was worth one amount, a crushed spine another. It was all very tidy, very civilized. You walk away from the scene, stomach tightening in a quiet, shameful way. The tour continues, but it feels thinner now, like the factory walls have started whispering. Eventually you retreat to your on-site office. It's more comfortable than it has any right to be. Carpeted, panelled in walnut, with a decanter on the desk and a framed lithograph of your first meal over the fireplace. You sit heavily in the leather chair and pour a drink, not out of thirst, but out of ritual. The glass clinks against your ring, the one engraved with your family crest at Billionaire. Because of course you have a family crest. It features a lion, a hammer, and an eagle. Because subtlety is for people with less money. You stare at the fire. Here's the debate that haunts you tonight. Can an empire be built without breaking backs? Some say no, that the system demands sacrifice, that progress bleeds. Others argue that it was all unnecessary, that better conditions, fairer hours, real humanity could have existed if men like you had cared more and calculated less. You're not sure who's right, but you know who profits. As the evening sets in, you leave the factory grounds. The air outside is cold, biting. You get into your car and sink into the leather seat. The driver tips his cap. You give the order to return to your city residence. A more intimate mansion. Just 15 rooms. Small by your standards. You sit in the back seat, coat pulled tight, and watch the buildings go by. Tenements line the streets. Clothes flap on lines. People walk home in groups, shoulders hunched, laughing, despite the cold. A woman drags a stubborn child across a slush-filled curb. And you, inside the moving warmth, feel like a ghost in a world you created but no longer belong to. Your name is carved into beams that hold up cities, but no one looks up anymore. Your dinner in Chicago is not what you'd call subtle. The dining room of the Grand Union Hotel is overflowing with velvet brace and cigar smoke, each chandelier dripping with so many crystals it's a miracle gravity hasn't filed a formal complaint. You're escorted to a private room upstairs away from the main floor, where society's less powerful rich people clink glasses and pretend to enjoy braised squab. No, your table is with them, the titans, Carnegie, Morgan, a senator whose name you keep forgetting, but whose moustache could smother a child. The table itself is a monument to gluttony. Silver chargers the size of wagon wheels, napkin rings carved into miniature eagles, and wine poured from bottles that likely cost more than most families will earn this year. You take your seat with the grace of a man accustomed to dinner chairs that look like stolen thrones. One cushion even has your initials embroidered in gold thread. You pretend not to notice. Conversations bounce around the table with the chaotic rhythm of power trying to sound casual. Andrew Carnegie is complaining, cheerfully of course, about labour agitators and Homestead. He jokes that soon the workers will be demanding weekends off at him. And everyone laughs like that's the most absurd idea they've ever heard. You laugh too, though it's half-hearted. Your mind is still on the man crushed beneath that steel tongue this morning. JP Morgan, across from you, is swirling a glass of claret and explaining his latest railroad consolidation as if he's describing a new set of cufflinks. He doesn't brag, he simply declares, "There's something deeply unsettling about Morgan. He has the face of a villain in a moral allegory, and eyes that look like they've already decided how the world will end." The senator, still can't remember his name, starts with an F, leans toward you and asks, "So what's your next play, Wexley? We're hearing rumours about you in oil." You smile carefully, because that's what this dinner is really about. Not camaraderie, not friendship, it's about chess, business masquerading as beef Wellington. Every course is a new move, every compliment is a pawn advance. And you're not here to make friends, you're here to keep your enemies seated where you can watch them chew. A waiter places a roast quail in front of you. It's garnished with edible flowers and a sprig of something French. You cut into it while Carnegie pivots to a story about his personal library, name-dropping Tennyson and Darwin like dinner guests. Everyone nods appreciatively, but no one really cares. They are waiting for the moment someone slips, someone admits too much, or forgets who holds how many shares in what. Eventually, talk turns to philanthropy. Morgan scoffs. "Charity is what you do when you can't control anything else," he mutters, then takes a long drink. You almost agree, but you also know better than to challenge him outright. So you change the subject. You talk about your latest yacht. It's not new, but the conversation makes it so. You describe the ballroom on the lower deck. The frescoed ceiling painted by a frustrated Italian genius who claimed to be channeling the spirit of Michelangelo. Carnegie nods, Morgan barely reacts, and the senator, Frederick, says something about commissioning a similar vessel to entertain the boys from Standard Oil. And here's your historical fact. These men did exist, and they did dine like this. The most powerful industrialists of the Gilded Age were tight-knit, competitive and aggressively performative. They wielded dinner tables the way generals wielded maps. Relationships were forged, alliances made, corporations merged, often over a plate of veal and a cigar. But here's your fringe detail. Not all these men liked each other. Behind the smiles and toasts were vendettas, feuds, and backroom schemes. Carnegie and Morgan famously clashed. Rockefeller detested most of them, and yet they kept coming to these dinners, because power was social before it was financial. At some point, dessert arrives, a ridiculous tower of spun sugar, chocolate, and liquor-soaked cherries, and everyone leans back, loosening ties and asking for cognac. You oblige, though you only sip, your head still in the mill, still thinking about that porter on the train, still wondering what tonight's performance earns you beyond another glowing write-up in tomorrow's Tribune Society pages. The talk grows looser. The senator, you've committed now, his name is Fitzgerald, thank God, launches into a rambling story about his summer estate and the feral swan that chased his niece through a rose hedge. Carnegie laughs so hard he coughs. Morgan chuckles politely, though you suspect he's mentally shorting 3 banks. Then someone asks you the question. "What's it like?" Carnegie says, eyes narrowed. "Being you?" The room quiets slightly. You didn't expect this. You smile, slow and deliberate. "It's like owning a chessboard," you say. "Except the pieces don't know they're being moved." There's a pause, then laughter. Carnegie pounds the table. Morgan smirks like he's seen something interesting for the first time all night. Fitzgerald raises his glass and toasts to the Kingmaker. You clink glasses, but something feels hollow in your chest, because that's not really how it feels, not all the time. Sometimes it feels like being carried along by a machine you helped build but can't control. Sometimes it feels like the gold leaf on your toilet seat is starting to peel. Eventually you excuse yourself, citing an early meeting. Your carriage is waiting, warm and quiet. Outside the streets are dark and wet, and the city has that strange late-night glow, like it's breathing in its sleep. On the ride home you think about what Morgan said, about charity, about control, and here's the debate floating quietly in the historical waters. Were these dinners signs of stability or desperation? Did these men truly believe they were gods of industry, or were they simply too scared to stop playing the part? You arrive at your Chicago residence, smaller than your New York palace but still laughably huge. The footman opens the door, the gaslights hum. You step inside and hear nothing but the soft tick of a clock somewhere deep in the hall. It's only 11:30, but you're already tired. Not from the food or the company, but from the weight of pretending that this life still excites you. You wake up to the sound of your own name being shouted in the street. It's not a dream. You're sitting up in your bed, silk sheets tangled around your legs, the morning sun painting gold bars across the floor, and outside someone is definitely shouting, loud, angry, clear as a church bell in hell, "Wexley steals our bread, what bar?" Again, "Wexley kills our arms." You blink, rise, move to the tall windows, peel back the velvet curtain. Outside your Chicago mansion, a crowd is gathering. Men, women, a few children perched on their father's shoulders. Not the kind of people you see in your drawing room or at the symphony, or sipping sherry at Delmonico's. These are mill hands, porters, machinists, daughters with dirty sleeves, mothers with clenched fists. One holds up a sign. Steel blood on gold hands. Another. "We are not your fuel." You feel something gonna twist in your gut. Not fear exactly, not guilt either. Something more complicated, something with teeth. Your butler arrives at the door, cheeks flushed, clearly rattled. "They started arriving just before dawn, sir. Police are on their way." You nod slowly, say nothing. Protests are nothing new, but this one is personal. This one came to your house. By the time you've dressed and stepped outside, flanked by your security staff in their slightly too crisp uniforms, the police have arrived, horses snorting, truncheons already out. The shouting grows louder. The air thickens. A brick flies. Shatters a window to your left. You don't flinch. Because here's the uncomfortable historical truth. Protests during the Gilded Age were not rare, nor were they peaceful. The country was laced with tension, workers organising, wages falling, unions rising. Strikes erupted over the smallest spark. The Haymarket affair, the Homestead strike, the Pullman strike, you remember them all. You funded lawyers for one, bought off a judge in another, and still the tide rises. You walk down the steps slowly, your boots clicking like punctuation. "Let me speak," you tell the officer in charge. He hesitates, then nods. You approach the line, the crowd bristles. You hold up your hands, palms out like you're about to give a sermon, or catch a very awkward ball. "My friends," you begin. They don't boo, but they don't cheer either. The silence that falls is worse. "I know these are hard times," you say. "I know there are questions, doubts, pain, and I hear you." "Do you?" You say it anyway. "I built these mills to give men work," you continue, "not to take their dignity." Someone yells, "Then why'd you buy the Pinkertons?" That stings, because it's true. You've used hired men before. Not personally, of course, but your company did. Quietly, efficiently, with plausible deniability wrapped in iron fists. You switch tactics, promise review, a new oversight committee, a modest wage increase. It's enough to stall them. Not silence, but hesitation. The police begin to push them back gently. You retreat up the steps, face like marble, heart pounding in your ribs. The protesters slowly disperse. You can't help but notice how many faces are young, how many eyes hold the kind of rage that festers, not fades. Back inside, your study feels cold despite the fireplace. You pour a brandy and sit in silence, staring at the shelves, at your awards, your medals, your framed news clippings, all praising you. None mentioning this morning. You're joined later by your lawyer, a man who somehow always smells like lemon oil and apprehension. He's got bad news. "There's talk of a formal inquiry," he says. "Something federal about labour conditions. They've already subpoenaed Ledbury and Company." You frown. Ledbury and Company owns 38% of your shipping lines. If they go under scrutiny, you'll be next. "I'll handle it," you say, though you haven't the faintest idea how. Your mind races. You think about that porter on the train again. His words. His eyes. You think about that man crushed in the mill, about the long list of names you sign off on every week without reading. You sip your drink and lean back in the chair, which creaks like it's tired of holding you up. Here's your quirky historical detail. One of your peers, an obscure copper magnate, once installed a decoy study in his mansion, complete with a fake fireplace and shelves full of hollow books. When protests got close, he'd hide in there, sipping tea and waiting for the noise to die down. You mocked him for it. Now you wonder if he was smarter than he looked. Your secretary arrives with a fresh stack of letters. Most are requests, money, meetings, endorsements. One, however, catches your eye. It's from your eldest daughter. Penmanship tight, angry, measured. She writes from Boston, where she's attended college under a pseudonym to avoid attention. She read about the protest. She saw the sign that said "Wexley kills our sons." She ends her letter with a line that aches. "Do you still know who you are, Father?" You fold the letter slowly, set it aside. Evening creeps in. You eat alone. The staff stays quiet, like a house in mourning. And here's the scholarly debate you try not to think about. Was this inevitable? Could the Gilded Age have existed without revolt? Or was it always a tinderbox waiting for flame? Some argue that the very system demanded collapse. Others claim the real tragedy wasn't capitalism itself, but the refusal to evolve it. You sit by the fire, watching the flames rise and fall. Outside, the street is quiet again. No protesters, just carriages, gaslight, the distant hum of trains, but you can still feel it. The unrest, the fault line beneath your gold-leafed empire. You finish your drink, let your eyes close, and try not to dream about signs in the street with your name written in blood. The next evening begins like all the others, decadently and with a flourish. You've chosen a sapphire blue cravat, tied by your valet with more concentration than a chess grandmaster under siege. Your shoes gleam like polished obsidian. A single pearl glints from your cuff. You stand in front of the mirror for a moment too long, not admiring, not adjusting, just looking, trying to see what everyone else sees. A man, a myth, a monster. The mirror gives no answers. Just a flawless reflection and a flicker of candlelight behind your eyes. Tonight is the opera. You don't go because you love it. You go because it's expected. Because to not go would start a small landslide of gossip. Is he ill? Is he in trouble? Is he losing grip? You step into your carriage, pulled by your finest team. White horses with braided manes and hooves shined like patent leather. Your driver is dressed like an officer in a silent war. Epaulettes, gloves, a blank expression that says, "I do not hear the things that happen in this carriage." Gas lamps glow soft in the fog as you pull up to the Metropolitan Opera House, that towering temple of drama and diamonds. The crowd is already assembling, a glittering stream of wealth pouring up marble steps. Your name is whispered before you enter, your presence both assumed and feared. A porter opens your door. You exit like gravity itself bends politely around you. Inside, chandeliers blaze above the rotunda. Gold leaf glimmers on every inch of plaster, as though the building were dipped in Midas's bathwater. The air smells like perfume, velvet, and a faint undercurrent of arrogance. You make your way past couples in brocade, duchesses in exiled tiaras, and men who all look vaguely like your banker. Your opera box awaits. It's not just a box, it's your box, bought, sealed, immortalized, carved with your family crest and lined with crimson silk. It's perched like a gilded bird's nest above the common rich folk, offering a panoramic view of the stage and a downward gaze at society itself. You settle in, glass of champagne delivered before you ask, and unfold the programme. Aida. Of course, 3 hours of longing, betrayal, war, and someone dying beautifully under a wall of song. You barely pretend to read the synopsis. You've seen it before. You've seen them all before. The curtain rises, music floods the hall, and for a while, you let yourself drift. You let the overture carry you. You let the soprano's voice pierce the shell you've built around your conscience. You watch actors pretend to suffer while real people strike outside your factories. There's something comforting about this, the sanitized performance of pain, the kind that doesn't stain. Between acts, a footman delivers a note. From your wife. She's not attending. Again. She's taken a sudden headache and decided to remain in your Newport estate. The letter is carefully worded, neutral, vaguely cold. You've both been performing civility for years now. Love left long ago, replaced by a truce and a calendar full of separate obligations. Her absence tonight won't raise questions, only quiet acknowledgements. Next to you, an older woman leans into her lorgnette and pretends not to watch you. She's wearing enough diamonds to trigger a small landslide. You catch her gaze and nod politely, and she flushes like a debutante caught peeking through a keyhole. "Magnificent performance, isn't it?" she says. "It's grand," you reply, "but it's the same story every time." She tilts her head. "Isn't it always?" The curtain rises again. Trumpets blare. A soldier marches off to war. The soprano collapses in someone's arms, her death agonizing and glamorous. You sip your champagne. And here's your historical fact for tonight. The Metropolitan Opera House was, quite literally, built by the nouveau riche, when old money families like the Astors controlled the Academy of Music and limited box ownership to a select few, the new elite, including men like you, said, "Fine, we'll build our own." And they did. Bigger, louder, more gilded than anything before. It was both rebellion and power move, wrapped in velvet and verdi. The opera ends with a breathless silence, then thunderous applause. You rise, not clapping, just standing, watching the crowd. They applaud like it's a contest, like the loudest among them will be granted absolution. Your name echoes faintly through the hall as people see you leave, not shouted, whispered. Notoriety doesn't need volume. Outside, your carriage is ready again. Inside, waiting for you, is a newspaper left by your driver. He knows your preferences, knows you prefer to read in transit when the lights of the city smear past the windows like watercolour. The headline: Wexley graces the Met while strikes escalate in West Yard. Beneath it, a smaller column mentions your name alongside a growing list of complaints, injuries in the mills, corrupt housing conditions, low wages. One worker quoted anonymously says, "He's never stepped foot in our quarters, doesn't know our names, only our output." You fold the paper, let it rest beside you. The city slips past, the alleyways, the saloons, the tenement buildings with windows full of flickering yellow and hungry silhouettes. You glance at them the way a traveller might glance at a foreign landscape. Curious, detached, vaguely guilty. And here's your fringe detail. A rival tycoon of yours, one with a shipping empire, used to rent out entire opera boxes, not to attend, but to keep them empty, a power flex, an absence louder than presence. The rumour was he didn't even like music. He liked control. You wonder what your empty box will say about you one day. Back at home, the night has thickened into a luxurious kind of silence. Your butler offers to draw a bath. You decline. You don't feel like sinking into anything warm, not tonight. Instead, you go to your study, light a single lamp, open your ledger, and begin writing. Not numbers, not contracts, just names. Everyone you can remember from today, the man who shouted, the mother holding a protest sign, the porter, the foreman, the soprano who sang like she meant it, because someday when all of this is gone, when the gold peels and the curtains rot and the chandeliers fall, what's left won't be the view from your opera box. It'll be who you looked at, and who you didn't. Your schedule for the week, handwritten by your secretary in ink so crisp it could slice cheese, reads like a social marathon designed by sadists. Monday. Luncheon with the Ladies' Agricultural Horticultural Improvement Society. Yes, that's one organisation. Tuesday. Meet with the board of your newly acquired telegraph company to pretend you care about wires. Wednesday. Tea at the home of Mrs. Winifred Astoria Bellwether III, known more for her gossip network than her philanthropy. Thursday. The Mayor's Gala. Friday. A ball. Saturday. 2 more balls. Sunday, prayer and plausible deniability. You read the list over to breakfast, a perfectly square omelette that probably took 3 servants and a diagram to prepare, and sigh. Yeah, and a single sigh that could fund an orphanage if monetized. No one tells you this part about being absurdly wealthy in the Gilded Age. It's exhausting. It's not leisure, it's performance. A 24/7 Broadway production, where everyone is cast as either the important, the adoring, or the socially acceptable. Your week begins accordingly. The luncheon on Monday is as soul-numbing as expected. Dozens of women in pastel gowns sit around a garden that smells like crushed rose petals and faint manipulation, sipping tea and speaking in the kind of tight high voices that suggest they haven't taken a full breath since 1875. You're technically the guest of honour, being the recent sponsor of some greenhouse renovation no one will ever visit, but you speak exactly twice. Once to thank them for the cucumber sandwiches, and wants to agree that yes, tulips are making a comeback. Tuesday is the board meeting. You sit at the head of a long, cold table surrounded by men who look like variations of yourself. A saw, starched collars, thinning hair, pocket watches on chains heavy enough to double as weapons. They drone on about transmission rates and infrastructure. You nod thoughtfully, sketching in your notebook what might be either a very sad fish or a schematic for a steam-powered cannon. When someone asks your opinion, you clear your throat and say, "Let's ensure we're forward-facing but lean in our expenditures." It's nonsense, but it sounds confident. They all nod. You've said nothing and yet made a decision. That's the art of being powerful. Wednesday is worse. The tea at Mrs. Bellwether's house starts at 4 and lasts until time itself loses meaning. Her parlour is decorated in a style you'd call chaotic inheritance. Every wall crammed with portraits of long-dead relatives, all glowering like they disapprove of your shoes. The tea is served in porcelain so delicate it audibly whimpers when you pick it up. Mrs. Buesson. Bellwether greets you with both hands and no personal space. Mr. Wexley, she trills, her voice somewhere between a bird call and a toothache. We must discuss your presence at the Everleigh affair last week. Everyone is talking. Good things, I hope, you reply, knowing full well they are not. Oh, always, she says. Though someone did say your waistcoat was audaciously modern, I defended you, of course. You thank her with the exact smile you reserve for blackmailers and minor royals. Here's your historical fact for the evening. During the Gilded Age, society wasn't just an idea, it was an industry. Elite families maintained social calendars with the discipline of military campaigns. Entire fortunes were devoted to debutante balls, hunting parties and dinner dances that began with 4 kinds of oysters and ended in scandal. And if you missed a major event, you might as well have died. Social death was very real, and sometimes more permanent than the actual kind. Mrs. Berkate. Bellwether's parlour hums with thinly veiled insults disguised as compliments. Your new yacht is such a leap in scale, one woman says. It's so brave of you to go with 3 decks instead of 4. Another adds, I simply adore how you paired your shoes with that slightly outdated collar. It's very nostalgic. You smile, you sip, you pray for a small meteor. That night your secretary reports 5 new invitations to upcoming balls. 3 formal requests for you to sponsor marriages between your daughter and various unappealing dukes, and a note from a viscount who wants to borrow your art collection for a cultural exhibit, read to impress his mistress. You throw the viscount's letter in the fire. Thursday's gala is tolerable, mostly because it's so big you can disappear. The mayor gives a dull speech about progress while you stand at the edge of the ballroom or, watching a woman in peacock feathers, try to convince a lumber tycoon to build her a winter home in Spain. You smile at everyone, you remember no one's names, the band plays waltzes, the champagne never stops flowing. You are technically having fun. In reality, your face hurts from pretending. Friday arrives with 2 invitations and a splitting headache. You attend one ball, hosted by the Harringtons, who have more money than sense and a fascination with live birds in cages as centerpieces. You chat briefly with a banker who smells like gin and compromise, and politely decline to invest in an underwater railroad to Cuba. By Saturday, your tolerance is eroding. You arrive late to the second ball and find it already in full swing. The air is thick with perfume and ego. You dance with 2 heiresses, both named Lillian, neither of whom make eye contact while speaking to you. One tells you about her poodle's digestive issues. The other declares she finds socialism charming in theory, but simply ghastly for one's wardrobe. You drift, you observe, you nod. And here's your fringe detail. Some of the wealthiest women in this world carried calling cards so ornate they could barely fit in envelopes. Printed on ivory, gilded in gold, scented with imported rose oil. These cards were social weapons. An invitation, a power play, and sometimes a veiled threat. You have an entire box of them in your drawer. You've stopped reading them. They all say the same thing. Sunday morning, you sit alone in your breakfast salon. This one panelled in pale birch with a view of your inner courtyard, and for the first time all week, no one speaking at you, no orchestras, no fans fluttering, no cryptic proposals over lobster bisque, just silence. And here's the debate whispering in your mind as you cut into a poached pear. Was high society a culture or a cage? Was it the reward for success or a tax on freedom? Historians disagree. Some see it as necessary scaffolding, networks of influence that shaped the modern elite. Others say it was all hollow theatre, designed to distract the wealthy from the consequences of their own power. You stare into your tea. You can't remember what you did with your life this week, but you remember what you wore. You make the front page of the New York Herald on Monday morning. Again, not for anything meaningful, of course, not for the steel, not for the labour protests or the worker crushed by molten slag, not for the anonymous donation you signed off on last Thursday while wearing your dressing gown and eating an almond tart. No, this headline is louder, stupider, flashier. Wexley buys ivory horse statue for $75,000, Vanderbilt's outbid. You set the paper down gently, trying not to tear it in half. Across the room, your dog, who wears a monogrammed collar and, for reasons lost to time, sleeps on a Louis XIV fainting couch, snores softly, oblivious. You sip your coffee and stare at the photo beneath the headline. It's a grainy, smudged sketch of you standing next to the sculpture in question. A massive rearing horse made entirely from hand-carved ivory, imported from Florence, now positioned in your central stairwell like a relic from a fever dream. You barely remember buying it. There were cocktails involved, and a Vanderbilt present. That's usually all it takes. Apparently, so you made a small comment, "Whatever they bid, I'll double it," and walked away before anyone could challenge you. Your secretary informs you this morning that the statue was delivered by 11 labourers and a crane, and that several priceless vases were shattered in the process. You hadn't noticed. The house has too many vases. Later in the paper, buried beneath columns of horse races and opera reviews, you spot a smaller headline. Factory boy loses arm in gear malfunction. Family demands compensation. It names your company. Briefly, coldly, no photos, no outrage. Just 5 sentences and a typo. You crumple the mayor and toss it aside. It hits the floor like a dead thing. You try to focus on other matters. There's a meeting about expanding your shipping routes to the Pacific Northwest. A banker arrives, hat in hand, asking for funding to establish a new electric company in Pennsylvania. He brings diagrams and graphs, speaks quickly, trembles when you don't immediately respond. You fund it. Not because you're interested in electric lighting, though it's all the rage, but because it might outpace Edison, and because the banker called you visionary without irony. That always helps. Then comes the matter of the Fabergé egg. Yes, that one. You hear about it first from your art broker, a wiry man with too much hair and not enough shame, who bursts into your study holding a telegram from Paris. It's the only one of its kind, he breathes. It's not even a real Easter egg, it's a masterpiece. You raise an eyebrow. Does it do anything? He stutters. Well, it opens. There's a tiny carriage inside. You stare at him. It's made of diamonds. You stare harder. And it once belonged to the Russian Tsarina's cousin's wet nurse. You sigh. Buy it. But Mr. Vanderbilt, I said buy it. And there it is again, that itch at the base of your skull. The rivalry, the show, the never-ending useless war over whose collection sparkles louder. You're not even sure what the prize is anymore. Legacy? A paragraph in a museum brochure someday? Or just the satisfaction of knowing someone else had to settle for second? Here's your historical fact. During the Gilded Age, conspicuous consumption wasn't a vice. It was a strategy. The elite didn't just buy things, they bought better. More rare, more expensive, more absurd. The purpose wasn't to enjoy, it was to remind the world that they could. And here's your fringe detail. One wealthy widow in Boston was known for commissioning oil paintings of every meal she ever ate. Breakfast, lunch, supper. All immortalized in gold frames and hung in her nutritional salon. It was considered eccentric, even by Gilded Age standards. You think about that woman now as you stare at the ivory horse in your stairwell, already gathering dust. In the afternoon, a journalist comes by uninvited. You recognize him as one of the newer breed. Young, scrappy, wearing a suit one size too big and shoes that have clearly been resoled. He doesn't wait to be offered tea. He cuts straight to it. "Why'd you buy the horse?" he asks. You blink. "What horse?" "The ivory one." "Oh, that." You wave a hand. It was an impulse. He scribbles furiously in a notebook. "Do you consider yourself in competition with the Vanderbilts?" You consider your answer, then smile. "I don't compete," you say. "I redefine the game." He eats that line like candy syrup, scribbles it down twice, but then he pauses, looks up. "What do you say to people who claim you're out of touch? That you're building statues while workers starve? That you treat your wealth like a joke?" You feel a stillness settle over the room. You could end the interview right here. You could have him removed, blacklisted, erased. Instead, you stand, walk slowly to the window, and look out over your garden. The topiary this month is shaped like sea monsters. You can just make out the delivery boy on the street outside wheeling a cart full of coal. You say, "There's always a gap between the builders and the world they build." "Is that a justification?" the journalist asks. "No," you reply, "it's an observation." He writes it down, but his eyes are different now, less impressed. He leaves soon after, already composing your legacy in his mind. And here's your scholarly debate for the day. Did Gilded Age industrialists know how absurd they seemed? Did they recognize the parody? Or were they so embedded in their own echo chambers that everything, golden toilets, horse statues, jewel-encrusted eggs, felt reasonable? You think you know the answer, but you're not ready to say it aloud. That night, after a dinner, you walk through the halls of your mansion in silence. The ivory horse catches the moonlight, casting a long, bizarre shadow across the marble. You stop, stare. It is beautiful, and also utterly ridiculous, and still so you can't bring yourself to get rid of it. Because you didn't buy it for admiration. You bought it so no one else could. You know he's coming before the butler even finishes his sentence. Mr. Hollingsworth is here to see you, sir. You set your glass down on the mahogany sideboard with a little more force than necessary. The crystal hums as if it senses something's about to break. You sigh, adjust your cravat, loosen your shoulders. Let him in, you say, in the same tone one might use when welcoming a fox into the henhouse just to see what happens. Of all your rivals, and they are legion, Thaddeus Hollingsworth is the most insufferable. He's not richer than you, though he likes to pretend he is. He doesn't own more companies than you, though he talks like he built the entire Industrial Revolution by hand. What he does have, unfortunately, is charm. That polished, predatory kind of charm that makes him popular with both duchesses and senators. His monocle alone could win elections. He strides into your drawing room like he owns the air. His suit is a deep maroon, tailored to within an inch of its existence, and his moustache has been curled so aggressively it might violate building codes. "Wexley," he says, extending a gloved hand. "You look well." "Hollingsworth," you reply, taking the hand and mentally comparing its temperature to that of a dead trout. "I see the rumours of your demise were tragically premature." He laughs. The way rich men laugh when there's no actual humour involved, just smoke. The butler brings brandy. You both decline cigars, too early for them, or too tense. You sit across from one another, legs crossed in mirror image. It would be a pleasant scene if the room weren't suddenly 5 degrees colder from the sheer mutual loathing radiating across the rug. "So," you say, swirling your glass, "to what do I owe this intrusion?" He smiles, teeth white enough to blink. "Copper," he says simply. You blink once. He leans forward. "Arizona. There's a mine, nearly untouched. The locals are restless, but nothing a little money and mild violence can't handle. I need your rail lines." You stare. It's always like this. Hollingsworth comes with an idea. You provide the infrastructure. He walks away with a fortune. You walk away with more headaches and possibly a federal investigation. He goes on, laying out numbers, figures, expected yields. You listen but barely. You're watching the way he's watching you, like a cat sizing up a mirror image. Like he knows exactly how this dance ends, but enjoys every step along the way. Eventually you interrupt. "Why me?" He raises an eyebrow. "'Cause you're still the best at moving things people aren't supposed to see." There's a moment, short, sharp, when the silence cuts between you. You sip your brandy, it burns, but not enough. "You know," you say, "I still haven't forgotten what happened in Montana." He grins. "Ah, yes, the lumber debacle, that was unfortunate. You lost $2 million, a small town and a cousin to that debacle, but sure, let's call it unfortunate. Here's your historical fact for today. Industrialists of the Gilded Age often worked together, uneasily, competitively, and always with one hand behind their backs. Mergers, alliances, temporary collaborations, all built on shifting sands. It was a time of handshake deals made over steak dinners and broken in courtrooms the following week, your fringe fact. A lesser-known rail baron once faked his own death to avoid a hostile merger. Lived in Cuba for 5 years under the name Bartholomew Wrench. He returned when the other man went bankrupt, reclaimed his company, and was greeted with applause. That's the level of theatrical nonsense you're operating in. You lean back. "Hollingsworth," you say. "You're a snake." He raises his glass. "Better a snake than a fossil." "Ouch." You smile anyway. "I'll consider it," you say, "but only if I get 40%. 30, he counters instantly. 40, you repeat. 35, and I'll throw in the land rights to the southern spur. You pretend to think. "Done," you say, and shake hands, hating the feel of his glove, the smugness of his grip, the inevitability of your agreement. He stands, already talking about celebration. Mentions a party he's hosting next week. There will be a band, fireworks, possibly a contortionist from Prague. He leaves you an invitation that smells like pine and ambition. After he departs, you sit in the silence, alone. The deal is good. The profit's solid. but something about it gnaws at you. You can't tell if it's the terms or just the man. You walk to the window and look out over your garden again. The statues are backlit, the sea monsters trimmed to perfection. You wonder how many people have walked past this house today thinking it's a palace. You wonder if they'd say the same if they knew what was discussed inside. Here's your scholarly debate for the evening. Was the Gilded Age's obsession with rivals and duels of influence a reflection of economic necessity or masculine insecurity on a national scale? Were tycoons like you building fortunes or just measuring legacies? The answer doesn't really matter, because it's already set in motion. That night you dine alone, the food is perfect, the wine is older than most governments, but your appetite is gone. After dinner you pull a ledger from your study drawer, not the financial one, the other one, the one where you keep a different kind of account. You flip past names, past tallies, past moments you haven't dared revisit in years. Then you add a new entry, Thaddeus Hollingsworth, Arizona deal, 35%, and something you'll regret. You close the book, you pour another drink. You sleep poorly, and in your dreams, the copper mine is burning, but you're not putting it out. You're smiling. There's a knock on your study door, 3 soft taps, each one delivered with the precision of someone who understands that disturbing you could result in anything from a salary raise to spontaneous exile. You glance up from the report in your hands. It's something about rail tariffs, barely interesting enough to register, and call out, "Enter." Your butler steps in, holding a letter on a silver tray. Always the tray, it's his thing. "This arrived by courier, sir," he says, as if the paper might bite you. "From the children's wing." You frown. "Which child?" you ask. "The younger, sir." Ah, of course, you take the envelope. The handwriting is precise, slanted, and already full of that practiced elegance that implies expensive tutoring and the quiet pressure of impossible expectations. It's from your daughter, not the one at university, staging ideological rebellions under a pseudonym and writing letters that read like philosophical indictments. No, this is the younger one, 12, maybe 13. You've missed a few birthdays. She's still under your roof, though barely under your radar. You slit the envelope open with your letter opening ivory inlaid with silver, probably French, and unfold the note. It's short, 2 paragraphs, and every word makes you stop breathing. She wants to play chess with you, that's all. She writes that she's been practicing, that she's read the books in the Blue Library, and that the nanny taught her how to counter a Sicilian defence. She signs it with a flourish and adds in tiny letters at the bottom, "I'm better than you already." You stare at the note for a long moment, and then, God help you, you smile. Chess. You haven't played in years, not since London. Not since that week-long match with that Austrian industrialist who died 2 months later under mysterious circumstances involving an exploding samovar. You're still not convinced it wasn't murder by hubris. You rise, tuck the note into your coat, and walk through your mansion with a rare kind of purpose. The children's wing is quieter than the rest of the house, less marble, more carpets, fewer oil portraits of angry ancestors and more drawings, crayon sketches, little figures with too many arms and smiling suns. You pass a portrait someone has framed of a cat wearing a monocle. You're not sure if it's based on your cat or just a general aesthetic statement. Your daughter is waiting in the nursery-turned-classroom-turned-game room, sitting at a small table with a polished ebony chessboard between her and an empty chair. She looks up, grins. "I thought you might ignore it." You sit down slowly, adjusting your cuffs. "I considered it," you admit. "You're going to lose," she says, rearranging the pawns with the glee of a girl who understands the value of psychological warfare. "You're a Wexley," you reply. "That makes 2 of us." She moves first, boldly, carelessly. You raise an eyebrow and counter. The game begins. Here's your historical fact. Chess was enormously popular among the elite during the Gilded Age. It wasn't just a game, it was a language of power, strategy, intellect. Businessmen played it to sharpen their instincts. Society wives learned it to appear intellectually engaging during salon conversations. One railroad magnate reportedly refused to sign any contract with someone he hadn't first beaten across 64 squares. You wonder, as you block her night, if you ever used to love the game, or if it was always just another way to win something that couldn't be taken back. She's good. Not exceptional yet, but clever. Brave with her queen, ruthless with her rooks. She makes mistakes, but learns immediately. You find yourself surprised, then impressed, then reluctantly concerned. 20 minutes in and she's pinned your bishop. You lean back. Have you been practicing secretly? She grins. You think I'd tell the nanny everything? The conversation between moves drifts into other things. School, the pet falcon you forgot you had, the fact that one of the peacocks in the conservatory escaped last week and had to be lured back with an opium-scented biscuit. You don't ask why the kitchen had those. She tells you her favourite book is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but she thinks Captain Nemo was an idiot with good taste in furniture. You listen. Actually listen. It feels unfamiliar. And here's your fringe detail. One famous Gilded Age heiress was reportedly forbidden from playing chess because her father believed too much strategic thinking in a woman led to emotional damage. She grew up to become one of the first female economists to testify before Congress. Chess doesn't ruin minds. It just trains them to see cracks in power structures. Your daughter checkmates you with a move so simple you almost miss it. You stare at the board. She blinks. That's it, right? You narrow your eyes. Yes. She laughs so hard she spills her lemonade. I beat you. Beginner's luck, you grumble, resetting the pieces. Let's go again, she says. And you do. For over an hour, game after game, win, lose, draw. The walls around you lower with every pawn captured. By the end, you're no longer the tycoon, the name in the headlines, the man who buys absurd statues to spite rivals. You're just a father. You walk her back to her room as the gaslights flicker on. The hallway feels warmer than usual, less echo, more memory. She turns at the door. You're not so scary, she says. Everyone thinks you are, but you're not. You freeze. Is that a good thing? She shrugs. It's just a thing. She disappears into her room. You return to your study with a different weight in your chest. One that's less like guilt and more like recognition. Here's your scholarly debate tonight. Can legacy be personal? Can a man defined by empire also be remembered, somehow, as human? Some historians argue that Gilded Age magnetes left only shadows, footprints in steel and marble. Others believe their private lives, their letters, their unguarded penments reveal something deeper. You sit back at your desk, open the ledger again, not the numbers, the other one, and you add, C. Wexley. Checkmate at 12, built like her father but smarter. The sound comes before the message, an urgent clatter of hooves on cobblestone, or too early and too loud to be anything other than trouble. You're in your reading room, mid-sentence in a novel you're pretending to enjoy, something Russian, everyone dies beautifully, when your butler bursts in without knocking, a mortal sin under normal circumstances. There's a protest, sir, he says breathlessly. Downtown, one of yours? You lower the book. Which one? Textiles, sir. Bleecker Mill. You exhale. Of course it's textiles. You rise slowly, calmly, But beneath your composed exterior, gears are turning. Bleecker Mill is one of your older acquisitions, a low-margin, high-output operation, mostly manned by immigrants and women. The kind of place you forget about until something goes wrong. Which it just did. You step into your boots, throw on a coat lined with sable, and head to the carriage already waiting outside. Your driver doesn't ask questions, he saw the smoke, and there is smoke. Rising in soft plumes above the city skyline like the breath of a furious god. By the time you arrive, the street outside the mill is chaos. Hundreds have gathered, some holding signs, some shouting, some just watching, as if waiting for the match to strike. Police are stationed like statues, hands on batons, eyes like flint. Across the square, the factory's tall brick facade looms with silent guilt, its smokestacks and unusually still. A bottle shatters, a horse rears. The crowd surges for a moment, then pulls back. You're ushered through a side alley and into the foreman's office, where the air smells like ink, sweat, and desperation. They walked out this morning, the foreman says. Something about hours. Pay. A woman fell asleep at her loom and lost 2 fingers. Now they're all talking about unions. You remove your gloves, slowly, deliberately. And the overseers? Panicking. Of course they are. You sit behind the foreman's desk, your desk, technically, and glance over the ledger. Hours are long, wages stagnant, safety protocols last updated. Never. You read a line that makes your stomach tighten. Children under 13 move to night shifts to avoid daytime complaints. You push the book away. Tell the Pinkertons to stand down. The foreman stiffens. Sir? I said stand them down. You don't know where the words are coming from. maybe the porter, maybe your daughter, maybe the sound of your name shouted through clenched teeth in the streets. But something in you has shifted, barely, like a foundation cracking in silence. Instead, you say, "I'll speak to them." Outside, the crowd murmurs as you step onto the steps of the mill. You raise your hands, not in surrender, not quite, but in presence. Your voice is loud enough. Your coat flaps in the wind like a banner. Your hat stays firm. "I've heard you," you begin. They don't boo, not yet. "I can't fix everything today," you continue, "but I can start. Starting tomorrow, the hours will shorten. Pay will increase, children will go home." A murmur, a shift in weight. Someone yells, "You're just afraid." You don't deny it. You say, "Maybe, but fear doesn't make a promise untrue." A woman at the front nods. She's holding a child in one arm and a sign in the other. You wonder if her hands ache, if she has a name you'll ever hear again. You step down, walk back into the mill, and sit in the silence with the weight of your words echoing behind you. Here's your historical fact. Child labour in the Gilded Age wasn't just tolerated, it was normalised. Children as young as 5 worked 12-hour shifts in mines, mills and factories, often under horrific conditions. Reform didn't come fast, it came in inches, in laws watered down by lobbyists and promises made by men who never meant to keep them. And your fringe detail? There was a mill owner who, after losing his own child to illness, abruptly shut down his entire operation and paid severance to every family. He vanished into Canada. Some called him mad. Others called him the only decent man they'd ever worked for. You won't vanish. You're not that kind of ghost, but you feel a thread tugging loose somewhere in the tapestry you've wrapped around your life. You return home after dark. The city rolls by like a slow-moving organism. Lamps flicker. Children play stickball in alleyways. Someone sings on a fire escape. For a moment you imagine yourself out there, nameless, normal. No factories, no portraits, no legacies to maintain. At home, your staff parts like water as you pass. No one speaks of the protest. No one asks. But you catch a look in your butler's eye. Brief, curious, almost human. In your study, there's a letter waiting from your daughter, the older one. It reads, "I saw what you did today. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. That's all." You stare at the page until the words blur. You open your ledger, the real one, the quiet one, and you add Bleecker Mill, partial reform, crowd dispersed without blood. And then, just below that, unknown woman, child on hip, held the line. Here's your scholarly debate tonight. Can one good act weigh against a lifetime of ruthless success? Is redemption cumulative, or does it require surrender? You close the book, you don't have the answer, but for the first time in a long while, you want to try. Section 16. You didn't mean to start a revolution, truly. That was never the plan. It began innocently enough as an art investment. Or at least that's how your assistant phrased it when he first dropped the pamphlet on your breakfast table, right between a broiled tomato and the lukewarm tragedy of your overcooked eggs. Modern, he said, with that glint in his eye that usually precedes legal complications. Provocative. European influences. Slightly political, but the right kind of political, nothing that would offend donors or the Archduchess. You remember nodding vaguely. It was early, you were tired. Somewhere between the third strike at Bleecker and the second chest loss to your daughter, your soul had adopted a permanent slouch. The proposal was simple. Back a new art collective forming in downtown Manhattan, a bunch of wild-eyed intellectuals, painters, and poets trying to shake up the stagnant art scene with social realism and satirical sculpture. You liked the phrase satirical sculpture. Sounded like a harmless jab at bad taste and busts of Caesar. You scribbled a check for $50,000 without blinking, told them to make something memorable. And they did. Oh, they did. 2 weeks later, you're in your carriage en route to their grand unveiling at a rented gallery near Washington Square. You're wearing your best indifference and a velvet coat so dark it might qualify as an abyss. The driver offers to accompany you. You wave him off. You won't be staying long. Inside, the crowd is already dense. Turtlenecks, long skirts, unkempt facial hair, the smell of clove cigarettes and unwashed genius. Someone hands you a cup of something steaming. It might be tea, it might be soup. It tastes like burnt ideas. Then you see it. In the centre of the room, beneath a halo of flickering gas lamps and self-satisfaction, stands a sculpture titled "The Baron Feeds the Machine." It's made of scrap metal and wood, twisted into the shape of a towering, emaciated industrialist. clearly modelled after you, feeding coal into the mouth of a massive machine shaped like a bloated pig with gears for eyes. Its belly is filled with doll parts. Its teeth are made of melted coins. It is horrifying. It is brilliant. It is you. You approach slowly, trying not to laugh, trying not to scream. Someone has painted a golden toilet seat on the back of the Baron's cloak. Your private joke broadcast to the world in rust and humiliation. The sculptor, a woman in a red waistcoat and a cloud of wild curls, appears beside you with a grin that could break glass. "Mr. Wexley," she says, "thank you for funding our revolution." You blink. Revolution? "Oh yes," she says, sipping something that smells like regret and absinthe. "You didn't read the full proposal, did you?" "You did not." "We're the Front for Artistic Workers' Liberation," she explains cheerfully. FAWL for short, bit of an inside joke. "We believe capitalism is aesthetic violence. This," she gestures to the pig machine hybrid, "is a love letter to the oppressed." You stare at the pig, the coins, the tiny hands. "It's a statement," she adds. "It's a lawsuit," you reply. She tilts her head. "You'll sue us after funding us?" She's right, of course, you can't, and not without confirming you were foolish enough to bankroll a group whose mission statement includes the phrase "death to profit aesthetics." You pivot. Politely excuse yourself. Try not to look at the painting on the far wall that clearly depicts you as a bloated marionette being dangled by your own monocle. You escape into the night, boots clacking against the cobblestone as a light snow begins to fall. You mutter a curse that rhymes with art and try not to admit that deep down, a part of you admires the audacity. Back at home, your secretary is waiting in your study. Of course he is. He's read the reviews already. The morning papers are out early tonight, and there you are again, on the front page of the Tribune, beneath a photograph of the sculpture. Tycoon turns patron of satire. Wexley backs anti-capitalist collective. You sigh so loudly it should qualify as a storm system. The headline isn't the problem, it's the ripple effect. Your board will want answers. The donors will demand distance. Hollingsworth will find a way to gloat through a telegram. Your wife, who still reads the Society column just to spite you, will likely send a one-word note. Congratulations. Here's your historical fact. Several real-life industrialists of the Gilded Age funded causes and groups they didn't fully understand. Some ended up accidentally supporting radical reformers, labour unions, or avant-garde writers who then turned around and used that money to mock them in public. The most famous instance, a railroad baron who once funded a magazine that ran an editorial titled "Monopoly is the Devil's Armpit." He cancelled his subscription, but he still renewed the funding, quietly. Your fringe detail? One wealthy heiress funded a theatre troupe that was secretly a front for anarchist meetings. When questioned, she claimed she thought Anarchy was the name of a French playwright. You pour a drink, a strong one, and here's the debate whispering in your ears as the fire crackles. Is this how it ends? Not in flames or scandal or slow financial collapse, but in satire? Do the empires of the Gilded Age crumble not from strikes or lawsuits, but from theatre kids with a grudge and some leftover scrap metal? You sit, you laugh. A single bitter honest laugh. You open the ledger, and under the latest entry you write FAWL. Sculpture. Unexpectedly accurate. Deserve every cent. Then beneath it, note. Never sign checks before coffee. Outside, snow falls heavier now. The world is quiet for a moment. You sip your drink. You stare at the fire. You wonder if you have accidentally become part of a movement, or if you've just lived long enough to become someone else's punchline. Either way, you're in the papers again, and that in this age still means you're winning, sort of. There's a room in your house that no one talks about. Not the staff, not your family, not even the eccentric Belgian architect who designed it, with a wink and the air of a man who had absolutely no ethical concerns about playing with God. It's not on any tour, not on any map, it doesn't officially exist at Diaz. But of course it does. You call it the observatory, though it hasn't contained a telescope in years. That was just the cover story, a harmless hobby for the wealthy gentleman. Who would question a little stargazing? But there are no stars in here. Tonight, as you descend the spiral staircase behind the West Library bookshelf, activated naturally by tilting out Volume 3 of the Histories of Antiquated Naval Law, you feel the familiar coolness rise up to greet you. The air smells like ozone, old leather, and something vaguely metallic. It's not fear, not exactly, it's anticipation dipped in lunacy. The observatory is part laboratory, part trophy room, part fever dream. One long hall lined with curiosities collected over the last 20 years, mostly by accident, occasionally through black market auctions, and once, memorably, via a disgraced Prussian count who claimed to be the reincarnation of Archimedes. You paid him in gold, then had him discreetly escorted to a ship bound for Madagascar. He sent a thank you card in Sanskrit. The lights hum as you step into the main chamber. To your left, a functioning Tesla coil, reassembled from 3 different prototypes and encased in reinforced glass to avoid further incidents with the staff. It emits a low, persistent hum like a bored god whispering static into the walls. To your right, a case holding what may or may not be a preserved Neanderthal molar, discovered by an explorer you sponsored who mysteriously disappeared in the Andes. The box bears a brass plate that reads, "Definitely authentic." That was your idea. Humour is important when you dabble in madness. And in the centre, the radium table. You didn't mean to collect radium. It started with a letter from a Polish scientist who needed funding, ended with 2 glowing vials arriving in a lead-lined crate, and spiralled from there. Now you've got 6, all locked in a steel-topped case you were advised not to open without protective gloves and a very good will. You do not wear gloves. You tap the glass. It hums. Your hand tingles. Somewhere in the chamber your parrot shrieks. Yes, you have a parrot down here. His name is Copernicus. He speaks 5 phrases, including "apologise to the vortex" and "that's not a moon, sir." You've long since forgotten why. Tonight you've come down here not for experiments, but for clarity. You pace the room, past a shelf of skulls, one possibly Etruscan, past the sealed cabinet of inflammable meteor fragments, past the iron lung-shaped thing you bought at auction under the belief it was a prototype thought machine. It did nothing. But it looks impressive. That's most of the appeal. In one corner sits your collection of Egyptian artefacts, a sarcophagus fragment, a canopic jar, a statue of Anubis that absolutely moves when you're not looking. You've had it bolted down 3 times. It continues to rotate. You've stopped asking why, and here's your historical fact. Many Gilded Age tycoons maintained private museums in their homes, filled with scientific curiosities, rare artefacts, and questionable acquisitions. These were less about scholarship and more about control, owning the unknowable, bottling the exotic. It was exploration by proxy, power in the form of preserved things. Your fringe detail? One still baron kept a meteorite in his foyer because he believed it improved his circulation. When a guest asked about it, he simply said, "It came from the stars, as did I," and continued slicing his roast duck. You pause in front of your mirror. It's not a mirror. It's polished obsidian, a single slab imported from Central America under vague promises of pre-Columbian significance. When you stare into it long enough, things appear. Not ghostly, not supernatural, but wrong. You once saw your own reflection blink out of rhythm with your eyes. You haven't looked at it the same since. The observatory is your secret world, a place where your empire doesn't follow you, where gold has no weight, where your name, so heavy upstairs, dissolves into something stranger. Something closer to curiosity, and it's also where you throw the parties. You host them rarely, only when the moon is right and the guest list properly curated. Scientists, occultists, authors banned from 3 countries. Once a young inventor who claimed he could photograph sound. He left in a hurry after someone dropped absinthe into the radium chamber. A terrible idea, by the way. Beautiful, but terrible. You think of throwing another soon. Something decadent, quietly dangerous. Not out of boredom, out of need. Because here's the debate spinning quietly behind your temples. Is this room evidence of madness? Or just proof that sanity is optional at your level of wealth? Does money unlock truth, or merely give men enough rope to hang their delusions in gold frames? You sit in the centre chair, the one shaped like a throne, and a dentist's chair had a regrettable child, and light a cigar with the flame from a Bunsen burner still hot from experiments you abandoned 3 months ago. You inhale, you exhale, and you watch the world flicker in the copper tubes and the dancing shadows. Here, you're not the man they print on front pages, not the capitalist villain, not the reluctant reformer, not the accidental patron of revolution. Here, you are what you were always most comfortable being, the observer, the collector, the quiet storm wrapped in silk and static. You stay there for hours, until the radium dims, until Copernicus stops shouting, until the things in the obsidian start to look like you again. Then and only then do you rise. You climb back up the stairs, you slide the book back into place, and your house becomes a mansion again. Nothing unusual, nothing to see, as there's a letter on your writing desk, and you already hate it. You haven't even opened it yet, but you know, the handwriting is too graceful, the paper too thick, the seal pressed with such deliberate flourish that it practically winks at you. The ink, crimson. The wax, blue, the kind of colour coordination that screams European nobility and centuries of practiced eccentricity. You reach for it with all the enthusiasm of a man retrieving a snake from under a velvet cushion. You break the seal. My dearest Archibald. It begins. Already we're lying. You haven't been dearest to anyone since the coal strike of '86. The letter continues in curlicues and overly elegant phrasing, full of flourishes and metaphors and references to long-ago garden walks that never happened. It is from Her Royal Highness Princess Wilhelmina Augusta, of something unpronounceable, probably German, possibly made up, definitely scandal adjacent. You met her once, briefly, in Paris, at a reception involving far too much champagne and a harpist who burst into tears mid-sonata. The letter, in essence, is a flirtation. A gentle poke with a lace-gloved hand. She mentions your name appearing so frequently in the pages of the London Times, and hints that her father, the Archduke of wherever, admires your work with steel, and privately calls you the Iron Heart of the New World. You very much doubt that. Then comes the real reason. She wants your help, not in a direct way. Of course, royalty never asks, they imply, they suggest. They place a hand on your arm and let the weight of bloodlines do the begging. She mentions the situation in Vienna, which you understand to mean we're broke, and proposes a discreet investment opportunity involving rare art, Baltic shipping contracts, and, somehow, a racehorse. You sigh deeply, because this isn't the first time a royal has courted you by letter, or the second, or the fifth. It's practically tradition now. You are the American archetype they fantasize about. Wealthy, powerful, uncouth enough to ignore protocol, but charming enough to become someone's regrettable memoir chapter. You walk to this window, letter still in hand, and look out at your garden. The hedge maze is being trimmed into constellations this month. Orion is missing an arm. Somewhere a gardener is probably arguing with a topiary sculptor about ancient Greek symmetry. You let the letter drop to your desk. Your secretary enters without knocking. He's learned when you're in moods like this, formalities are wasted oxygen. More invitations, he says, fanning out a stack of cream-coloured envelopes, and a telegram from the Viennese embassy. Of course there is, he adds. Also, the British ambassador has requested a private dinner. Just the two of you, he says. You groan. Is it about the canal? It's always about the canal. You pick up the telegram, scan it. Honoured to extend invitation to His Excellency Wexley for the Imperial Gala. Discussions to include art, investment, and mutual legacy. You fold it with the same tenderness you give to parking tickets. Here's your historical fact. During the Gilded Age, wealthy Americans were viewed by European aristocracy with a mix of disgust and desperation. Old nobility was crumbling under debts, and American industrialists, flush with cash and free from ancestral shame, became tempting sources of rescue. Marriages were arranged, estates sold, art loaned. It was a cultural exchange program disguised as diplomacy. And here's your fringe fact. One minor Italian prince famously offered to sell his family's title to a Chicago grain magnate's dog. The dog, a borzoi named Leopold, was officially styled as Duke of Modena for 3 months. No one questioned it. The dog had a better tuxedo than most people. You return to your desk, pick up the letter from Princess Wilhelmina again, and reread the last line. I would so love to see you in some Vienna. There's a portrait in the palace gallery that reminds me of you. He was a conqueror. Of course he was. But this isn't about ego. Not entirely. It's about legacy. About influence. About how you've become the gravitational force they now orbit. Still, you're wary. The last time you got involved in a continental matter, it nearly resulted in a duel, a lost diamond, and an extremely confusing article in Le Figaro. You call in your foreign advisor, a retired diplomat who smells like dust and perpetual condescension. He reads the letter, snorts and says, she wants funding, possibly marriage, possibly both. Either way, you'll be broke or related to her. She is attractive, so you offer. She also believes the moon is hollow, he replies. Fair point. And here's the debate simmering in your mind. Is this pursuit of international admiration truly expansion, or just gilded insecurity dressed in foreign medals? Does legacy mean spreading your name across oceans, or keeping it rooted where your workers know it, even if they curse it? That evening, you write your reply. You don't dictate it. You write it yourself, in ink, slowly, carefully. You keep it polite, flattering, and vague. You mention your schedule, your interest in art, your cautious optimism regarding transatlantic alliances. You sign it Archibald D. Wexley, no titles, no flourish. You leave out the word dearest. Then, on impulse, you add a line at the bottom. P.S. The moon is not hollow, but if it ever collapses, I suspect we'll both hear about it first. You seal it, press your ring into the wax. Then you walk to your study, pour yourself a drink, and stare at the flickering fireplace. Tomorrow you'll decide if you're going to Vienna. Tonight you're just a man fielding flirtations from royalty and wondering when exactly your life became a diplomatic performance art piece. You open the ledger. Add a line. Wilhelmina, princess maybe. Once legacy, once me. And then, after a pause, I miss when letters were just bills. The day the market creaks is a strange one. Eerily quiet, too bright, the kind of day that makes you think maybe the sky knows something no one else does. You're at your club when it begins, sitting in a red leather armchair near the fireplace, reading an article you don't care about in a paper you own. Across the room, men are murmuring just a little too softly, just a little too urgently. No laughter, no clinking glasses. Someone sets down a brandy without taking a sip. That's how you know it's bad. Your secretary finds you. He looks like he's run from the telegraph office. Jacket unbuttoned, hat askew, one shoelace trailing like a dead eel. "Sir," he says, "there's trouble on the floor." You fold the paper and nod. He doesn't need to say which floor. Wall Street, of course. The stock market hasn't crashed. Not yet. But it's leaning heavily on the rails, swaying like a man 3 drinks past dignity. You leave the club without finishing your drink. On the carriage ride over, your driver catches your eye in the mirror. He doesn't ask questions. He just speeds up. When you arrive at the exchange, the street is already boiling. Men in bowlers pace like caged animals, newspapers fly like terrified pigeons, and the air tastes like copper and ash. You push through the crowd, coat flapping behind you like a battle flag. Inside, the floor is madness. Phones ringing, clerks shouting, paper everywhere. You head to your office above the chaos. You have never felt more like a god in a Greek play, watching the mortals panic, safe behind glass and mahogany. Except you're not safe. Not really. You scan the ticker tape, and 2 of your holdings are bleeding. Your rail shares are stable, for now. Your coal venture is holding, but barely. A textile partner just sent a desperate telegram from Boston that reads, "We've overextended. Advise." You do not advise. You summon your chief financial officer, your lawyer, your broker, and a man who used to be your enemy but now works for you, because money makes hypocrisy inevitable. They arrive within the hour, all wearing the same expression. Politely alarmed, aggressively calm. They lay out options, sell here, hold there, shift funds, delay payments, bribe the board. They don't say bribe. Of course, they say manage expectations. It means the same thing. You nod, you ask hard questions. You approve 3 moves and reject 2, then you lean back and say nothing. Because the truth is, no one really knows what's happening. Not yet. This is not a crash, it's a tremor. But tremors are how avalanches start. Here's your historical fact. The Gilded Age was peppered with financial panics. 1873, 1893, 1901. They weren't always full crashes, but they were enough to wipe out fortunes, shutter banks, and send newspaper editors into poetic overdrive. Most were caused by speculation, rail overbuilding, or the simple arrogance of men who thought lines on a chart were invincible. Your fringe fact. One steel magnate kept a goat in his office, not for luck, not for show, but because he believed the goat could sense when markets were about to turn. When the goat refused to eat, he sold everything. The goat was right twice. You have no goat. Just a stack of risk reports and a coffee you forgot to drink 3 hours ago. You step out onto your balcony and look down at the street. A crowd has formed. Reporters. Investors. That man from your club whose laugh always sounded like a seal being strangled. No one is laughing now. You hear a commotion below, a runner, probably, delivering news too fresh for telegraphs. A bell clanging, someone shouting a number you don't like. You retreat inside, and then, with the kind of timing that makes you want to burn the concept of irony, your phone rings. It's your partner in the Arizona copper venture. He's frantic. The mine is flooding. There was a cave-in, 3 workers dead, possibly more. The local papers are circling like sharks. He wants to pull out. He wants you to cover it. He wants something. You rub your temples. I don't have time to solve everything, you say. I'm not asking for a solution, he snaps at it. I'm asking what we do. The silence on the line stretches. You give him the same answer you've given 100 times before. Buy time, tell them help is coming, then make sure it does. You hang up and immediately regret it. You open the ledger. You add 3 names. No last names, just the tally. Arizona, 3 lost, unconfirmed. You stare at the ink as it dries. And here's the scholarly debate tapping on your shoulder like an old friend you don't want to see. Do panics reveal the rot? Or do they cause it? Are crashes moments of reckoning, or just pauses in the ongoing fiction of endless growth? You're interrupted by a knock. It's your daughter. The older one. No warning, no appointment. Just her, standing in your doorway like a storm in a well-fitted coat. I want to see what you've built, she says. You gesture to the room, the charts, the maps. The empire? No, she says. I want to see what it costs. You hesitate, then you hand her the ledger. Not the polished one, the one. She flips through it silently, eyes scanning the inked entries. Her jaw tightens. Her mouth sets into something that is not quite anger, not quite pity. This isn't legacy, she says. It's accounting. No, she replies. It's confession. You say nothing. She leaves without closing the door. The market stabilizes slightly by sunset. Not much, but enough that the vultures go home early. You finish your drink, you stare at the balcony, you remember the goat. You laugh once, then you write a note to your secretary. Find me someone who can build a storm shelter that doesn't look like one. Because you know, this wasn't the collapse, this was the crack, and cracks always run deeper than they seem. It begins with a camera flash and ends with your soul feeling mildly pickpocketed. A French journalist sent by Le Monde Illustré, naturally, has arrived to profile the American tycoon who has gilded his life beyond recognition. You didn't invite him. He arrived by appointment your secretary somehow agreed to, citing international relations and the importance of shaping the narrative. You suspect your secretary is punishing you for ignoring his advice about the copper mine, or the sculpture, or possibly both. The journalist's name is Jules. He wears a waistcoat that could be used as a signal flag in wartime, and carries a notebook like it's blessed by some Parisian deity of scathing commentary. His moustache is waxed to perfect villainy. His French accent makes every compliment sound like a warning. Your estate, he says upon arrival, is very confident. You arch a brow. It reminds me, he continues, of Versailles. If it were constructed by someone with a mild addiction to mirrors and myth-making, you show him the east wing first. The modest rooms, just enough crystal to show restraint, enough portraits to suggest continuity. He scribbles in his notebook. You try to read it upside down, but only catch the phrase, obscene fireplace. Fair enough. You lead him through the rose parlour, the breakfast salon, the winter library. He asks clever questions about architectural lineage. You answer with just enough honesty to seem sincere, just enough fiction to keep your secrets fed. He photographs the golden doorknobs, the velvet wallpaper, your stuffed owl named Milton, who sits by the fireplace like he owns the place. He asks eventually about the bathroom. You blink. The what? The bathroom. The infamous golden seat. You resist the urge to sigh with the weight of 1,000 chandeliers. I assume, you say, you don't mean the metaphorical throne. He grins. May I see it? You consider saying no. You also consider setting the room on fire and pretending it never existed. But instead, you take him upstairs to the most scandalously discussed water closet in the Northern Hemisphere. It gleams, it always gleams. The gold seat is polished weekly by a man who never makes eye contact and refuses to say the word toilet. The tub is claw-footed and bigger than your childhood bedroom. The faucets are shaped like swans. No one uses the bidet, not even you. Jules is delighted. He takes 3 photos, one with a measuring stick, which feels oddly intimate. Then he leans against the doorframe, scribbling furiously. You do not ask what he's writing. Instead, you show him your private gallery. Not the observatory, God no, but the curated hall of paintings and artifacts that look like a legacy, even if half of them were acquired in the back room of a Monaco casino. He lingers in front of your portrait. The big one. You in furs, hand on globe, expression somewhere between I own this continent and this fur is itchy. You had this commissioned, he says. You nod. From a Russian painter? French trained, you correct. He nods. Monstrous beauty, he says. Industrial stem. You blink. Pardon? That is what I will call this exhibit, he says. Your life. Monstrous beauty. Industrial sin. You laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's accurate. Later, you take him to lunch. Only out of politeness. The table is set for 10. The room is empty but for the two of you. He eats with slow precision, as if measuring each bite against your income. Why do this? He asks suddenly. Why let me in? You sip your wine, because eventually someone always writes the story. I'd rather be nearby when the ink dries. He smiles. You fear misrepresentation. No, you say. I fear irrelevance. He sets his fork down. Then allow me to assure you, you are unforgettable. That night, after he leaves, you find yourself wandering the house. Every mirror seems to reflect back some version of Jules's commentary. Every chandelier feels just slightly more absurd. You walk past the fountain in your third foyer and wonder, honestly, why you need 3 foyers. Here's your historical fact. During the Gilded Age, the ultra-wealthy often invited foreign journalists and nobility into their homes to curate their image abroad. They wanted to be seen as sophisticated, educated, European in refinement. It rarely worked. The European smiled politely, took notes, and went home to write essays dripping with equal parts envy and ridicule. Your fringe detail? One railroad mogul built an exact replica of the Hall of Mirrors from Versailles, only shorter, because the ceilings in his home couldn't accommodate the scale. The French press dubbed it the Hall of Insecurity. You understand now. Jules wasn't here to praise you. He was here to observe your species. And here's the debate chewing at your conscience. Can legacy be built on spectacle? Or does every mirror eventually crack under the weight of performance? You end the night in your study. You open the ledger. You write, Jules, or foreign lens, saw everything, named it better than I could. And below that, legacy, not always what you build, sometimes what you invite in. The house is silent now. Even Milton the owl seems contemplative. You sit alone in the monstrous beauty you built, and wonder, not for the first time, if sin can ever be gilded into something noble. The tea is terrible. That's your first impression as you sit across from a young Theodore Roosevelt in the conservatory turned drawing room of his family's Manhattan brownstone. You are expecting something robust, black, smoky, maybe laced with something illegal, but what you get is a pale, translucent infusion that tastes like overcooked leaves and shame. Still you smile politely, because he's watching you like a hawk in pince-nez. Roosevelt is younger than you expect, less moustache, more muscle. His voice is clipped, direct. His handshake could shatter furniture. You're dressed like an opera villain. Topcoat, waistcoat, gloves hewn from some extinct animal, and he's in a wrinkled linen suit with a button that doesn't know if it's supposed to stay attached. You've made a fortune off men like this. Honest, idealistic, slightly dangerous. I appreciate you coming, he says. There are things we should discuss. You know exactly what things he means. You saw the pamphlets last week, Trusts a Tyranny, printed in bold red ink, handed out at city halls and libraries and left on benches like forgotten Bibles. And though your name wasn't mentioned directly, the illustrations bore an uncanny resemblance to a certain steel baron with a monocle, and what you must grudgingly admit is an impressively accurate villainous jawline. You've become quite the advocate, you reply, sipping more leaf water and trying not to gag. He chuckles, short and sharp. I'm not advocating, I'm observing, and what I see is a republic drowning in monopolies. You raise an eyebrow, and here I thought we were swimming in prosperity. He leans forward, elbows on knees, looking very much like a man on the edge of a speech. Prosperity for whom, Mr. Wexley? For the men in your clubs, or the boys pulling slag in your mills? For the women twisting thread in your factories? I'm not against business. I'm against kings wearing suits. You set your teacup down, gently. Aren't you aiming for a crown of your own? He laughs, this time louder, richer. I don't want power. I want balance. And if that means cutting the legs out from under men like you, I'll bring the axe myself. Ah, there it is, the threat under the manners. You've missed this kind of conversation. So many people around you have learned to soften their punches, to couch their criticisms in velvet. But Roosevelt? He'd rather punch through the velvet. Here's your historical fact. Roosevelt famously took on the trust during his presidency, earning the nickname Trust Buster. He saw monopolies not just as economic threats, but as moral failings, imbalances of power that corroded democracy. And he wasn't afraid to challenge men who built the railroads, the oil empires, the steel kingdoms. He viewed the Gilded Age titans as dragons hoarding treasure, and he made it his crusade to be the knight. Your fringe detail. Roosevelt once boxed with a professional fighter in the White House. Took a punch that left him partially blind in one eye. Didn't tell anyone for years. Why? Because even his injuries had to seem invincible. Back in the conservatory, the air feels thick with unspoken challenges. You want to tell him everything, the ledgers, the protests, the girl who beat you at chess, the sculpture that mocked you into seeing yourself more clearly. But you don't. Not yet. Instead you say, balance is admirable, until it tips. And wealth, he says, is always tipping it. You both sit in silence. The garden beyond the glass is full of ivy and overgrown roses. Somewhere a bee is doing its work without metaphor. He reaches for another cup of the terrible tea, offers to refill yours. You decline. Do you believe in progress? He asks. You do, but your definition is probably different than his. I believe in movement, you say. Whether it's forward depends on who's watching. He nods slowly, like he's adding you to some invisible mental list. People to watch, possibly ruin, maybe respect. The conversation drifts toward railroads, tariffs, conservation. You surprise him with your knowledge of forest management. He surprises you by not being surprised. I do read, you say, and occasionally walk in places without servants. Here's the scholarly debate of the evening. Was Roosevelt's war against the trusts an act of genuine reform or calculated populism? Was he dismantling oligarchies for the people, or carving out power for himself in a newly shaped battlefield? Historians still argue. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in the sharp edge between good intentions and political survival. Eventually you stand. He walks you to the door. You're not a villain, he says. Yet. You smile. And you're not a saint. He returns the smile. No, just a man with a long memory. You leave with a strange feeling crawling up your spine. Not fear exactly, not dread, but the awareness that the tide is changing, and someone younger, louder, and infinitely more caffeinated is preparing to build a world that may not need you. Back at your mansion, your butler hands you a small envelope, a thank you note from Roosevelt's staff. Inside is a clipping from a local paper, a column praising the meeting as an emblem of civility between opposites. You laugh, you open your ledger. Right, Roosevelt, sharp teeth, believes in balance, will never be tamed. Then underneath it, I liked him. I hope he never likes me back. You're not dying, not officially, but for the first time in your life the thought creeps in, quietly, absurdly, when you sneeze. One sneeze, that's all. But it rattles through your chest like a piano dropped down a staircase. You sit back in your reading chair, blinking at the chandelier above you, wondering if your heart just skipped a beat or staged a polite mutiny. You're in your morning room, sunlight glancing off the parquet floor, a soft breeze nudging the lace curtains like they're trying to escape. The paper lies forgotten on your lap, unread. There's a story about the mayor, another about rising railroad fatalities. Neither one can compete with the small but persistent awareness that you are in fact a human body. And that body, despite its silk, leather and gold trimmings, is starting to creak. You ring the bell. Your doctor arrives within the hour. Of course he does. You've kept him on retainer for 12 years. And in that time, he's treated you for exactly 3 actual ailments and 57 hypothetical ones. He smells faintly of antiseptic and peppermint. Wears spectacles that fog whenever he's lying. He checks your pulse, asks polite questions. You answer them with increasing sarcasm. He presses a stethoscope against your chest. You cough once, not dramatically, but enough. Then he frowns. That's new. Your lungs, he says carefully, are well used. You raise an eyebrow. I've never smoked a day in my life. You've inhaled enough coal dust from your factories to embalm an ox, he replies. It's not fatal, but it's not nothing. He scribbles something into a small notebook. You try to peek. You're sure he writes things like type A delusions or God complex, moderate to severe. He prescribes rest, fresh air, less shouting at people. He says it kindly, but you hear the subtext. You're not immortal, Archibald. Slow down before something breaks. You escort him out, thank him with a small tip and a larger bottle of brandy, and sit back down in the chair that now feels like it might outlive you. Here's your historical fact. Industrialists of the Gilded Age frequently died younger than expected. Stress, overwork, accidents, and in some cases, mysterious illnesses no one dared investigate too closely. Their wealth insulated them from poverty, but not from mortality. One steel baron had 5 heart attacks and simply refused to acknowledge them until the 6th left him dead in a Turkish bath. Your fringe detail? One shipping tycoon was so paranoid about germs he installed copper doorknobs throughout his estate and demanded guests undergo sanitary inspection before entering his ballroom. He died of a tooth infection, that he ignored, for 2 months. You wander through your house with new eyes, not admiring, assessing. How much of this will survive you? The chandeliers? Certainly. The paintings? Probably. The marble bust of you in the vestibule? Hopefully not. You stop in the mirror hall and regard your reflection. It looks expensive, but older than you remember. There's a new line near your eye, a sag at the corner of your mouth. Your hands, once so precise and commanding, now bear faint tremors when at rest. You leave the hall before the mirror says something impolite. Later, in the study, you open your personal ledger again. Not the one for steel, not for rail, not for strange curiosities or revolutions in sculpture. The ledger. You stare at a blank page. You consider writing, health, cracking, mortality confirmed by sneeze. But instead, you write nothing. Not yet. Instead, you return to the window. The trees outside sway, gently. Somewhere in a far-off part of your estate, children are laughing. Possibly yours, possibly someone else's. You've lost track of who's home and who's abroad. You feel like a shadow behind glass. You remember something an old friend once said. Legacy is just death in evening wear. You pour a drink. You shouldn't, but you do. And then you remember the letter. It arrived yesterday, but you hadn't opened it. It's from your oldest surviving friend, a man who made his fortune in textiles, then promptly gave half of it away to build a library no one uses. He signs his letters with, "In diminishing wealth, increasing spirit." You always liked that. The letter reads, "Archie, I know the years are stacking up like unpaid debts, but if the machine starts to slow, come visit. The Adirondacks are crisp this time of year. We'll smoke nothing, drink everything, and pretend we're farmers. Bring no papers, bring no hats, just your flawed self. I've missed him." You stare at that line, your flawed self. You've spent decades building walls of gold and marble around that man, and yet here it is, an invitation to bring him back out into the daylight. You don't reply, not yet. You sit, you think. Here's your scholarly debate. Does acknowledging mortality cheapen or strengthen legacy? Are the names carved into buildings worth more than the soft memories shared around someone's porch? Can an empire outlast a body without becoming hollow? You watch the sun begin to dip behind your absurdly large conservatory. Shadows crawl across the carpet. For once you don't rise to light a lamp. You let the room go dim. It feels honest. You open the ledger again. This time, you write body, fraying ego, intact, soul, TBD, then below that, for maybe I'll go to the Adirondacks. Just once, no monocle. And for the first time in a long while, the pen feels light in your hand. The sky doesn't look right when you arrive. It's too open, too clean. You'd forgotten stars could be this sharp. You tilt your head back, feel the weight of the heavens pressing down and realize, with the same clarity that used to come in boardrooms and courtroom threats, that you are utterly, gloriously nowhere. Welcome to the Adirondacks. You step off the train in a coat far too expensive for rural wood smoke and pine needles and immediately regret your shoes. They sink into damp earth like they're trying to defect. A man with a beard wider than your tax record greets you with a grunt, loads your luggage, 3 trunks and 1 suspiciously heavy valise, and gestures toward a wagon with a single horse and what appears to be a personality disorder. You nod, climb aboard, and let the woods close around you. Your friend, Samuel Griswold, textile heir turned transcendentalist-leaning recluse, is waiting at the cabin. He looks like a man who hasn't seen a cravat in 5 years. His hair has gone fully silver, his beard is trying to unionize, and his shirt is missing at least 3 buttons. "You came," he says, as if surprised. "You invited me." "I do that to a lot of people." You laugh. Inside, the cabin smells like cedar, smoke, and books that have been read more than once. There are 2 rocking chairs, a fireplace made from actual stone and not imported marble, and a single oil lamp flickering like it's trying to remember fire. There's no staff, no phonograph, no bells to summon anyone. Just the 2 of you and the quiet that folds in around everything like a wool blanket. Dinner is something vaguely stew-like. You don't ask what it is, you eat it. And for the first time in months, maybe years, you feel full without needing to button your jacket afterward. You talk, God, you talk, about everything and nothing, the old days, the madness of wealth, the time he tried to convince you to invest in airships, and you told him only fools and birds belonged in the sky, the woman he almost married, the empire you absolutely did. He asks if you still keep that ledger, the real one. You nod. Still using it, he asks. Still filling it. He leans back, pipe smouldering. Must be a long book by now. Getting heavier, he smiles, not unkindly. Then maybe it's time you start closing it. You pause, not because he's wrong, but because you've never once considered the idea that the ledger could end. It's always been in progress, a lifelong accounting of sins and moments and names no one else would remember. But out here, under these stars, with no brass doorknobs or gaslight chandeliers to keep your ego inflated, you realise maybe that's not the point. Here's your historical fact. As the Gilded Age waned, many industrialists did in fact retreat to country estates, mountains, or secluded resorts. Some went mad in the silence, others found a strange peace there, an unexpected grace. They stopped building towers and started planting trees. Some even lived to see their wealth used in ways they hadn't intended, but couldn't entirely regret. Your fringe fact? One railroad tycoon built a cabin with no walls. Just a roof, a cot, and a writing desk. He stayed there every summer for the last 10 years of his life, insisting that nothing man-made should stand between me and regret. His will included $10 million for forest preservation and an entire clause devoted to denying the existence of his monocle. In the morning, Samuel wakes you before dawn. "You're going to hate this," he says cheerfully. He drags you, begrudging, half asleep, missing your velvet robe, into the woods. It's freezing. You step on something sharp. You swear enough to wake birds. He laughs, which makes you want to shove him into a sapling. But then you reach the ridge, and the sun comes up. It's not a metaphor, not a parable, just the sun. Quiet, golden, slow, like the world remembering itself. And you, wrapped in wool and skepticism, standing beside your only real friend, feeling something unshaped pressed gently against your chest. You whisper, without meaning to, "I forgot this was real." Samuel doesn't answer. He just pats your shoulder and lights his pipe. You stay up there a long time, long enough that when you return to the cabin your boots are muddy and your lungs are clear. That night, after more stew and a story about a local fox who may or may not have stolen someone's trousers, you sit by the fire with your ledger, not the business one, the one. You stare at the empty page. Then you write, "Adirondacks, sky too big, silence louder than applause." And then, Samuel, still here, still honest, still terrible at stew, you close the book, not forever, but for now. Here's your scholarly debate tonight. Is redemption found in retreat or only made possible by it? Do the great men of an era earn peace or merely purchase time to reflect on their wreckage? Is withdrawal from empire an act of wisdom or cowardice? You don't know, but you feel something loosening. Something old, something proud. You sit it with that, let it breathe, and when you finally crawl into the scratchy sheets of the guest cot, you don't dream of gold, you dream of trees. Section 24. You return to the city not as a conqueror, but as a man who knows where his boots have been, and whose boots, frankly, still smell faintly of pine and whatever that fox left behind. The mansion greets you with its usual pageantry, gleaming brass fixtures, polished marble, staff standing so perfectly still you half wonder if they've been taxidermied while you were away. The butler takes your coat with his usual flair, but he squints slightly, as if trying to confirm that this slightly windburned man with sun-cracked lips and less lacquered hair is, in fact, still the Archibald D. Wexley who left a week ago. You say nothing, just nod. Inside, everything is where you left it. The bust of Cicero in the foyer still scowls at your choices. The grandfather clock in the east corridor still refuses to chime properly at the hour, and in your study your chair creaks in exactly the same spot it always has, right under your left hip like a ghost tapping a reminder. But something is different. Not outside. Inside you. You sit at your desk, stack of telegrams waiting. They all begin the same way. Urgent, important, crisis. You let them wait. For once, you let them stew in their own capital letters. Instead, you take out the ledger. Open it, but not to write. You flip through it, page by page. And it hits you like the moment a train engine first lurches forward after hours of stillness. This thing you've been building, this accounting of deeds and sins and strange encounters, is no longer just a record. It's become a mirror, and increasingly a map. Because tucked between the entries of revolutionaries and dead miners and roast-duck banquets, there are moments. Real ones. Human ones. You see the chess game with your daughter. The protest at Bleecker. The man who thought he could sell you a piece of the moon. You see yourself not as an emperor, but as a man who's been bumping into meaning while dressed like a chandelier. That night, you finally call a family dinner. This is rare. Not because you avoid your family on purpose, but because schedules clash and legacies clash harder. Your wife arrives fashionably late, draped in a gown so heavy it could qualify as armour. She eyes the seating arrangement like it's a trap. Your eldest daughter, still smoking opinions for breakfast, sits on your right, arms crossed. The youngest plops into her chair, already holding a pawn she probably lifted from the parlour. "I thought we'd eat like mortals tonight," you announce, gesturing to the meal, roast chicken. Potatoes, bread with actual crust, nothing infused, nothing foamed. Your wife glances at the chicken like it just asked her for a dance. "Rustic!" she mutters. The conversation begins awkwardly. Too many silences, too many people waiting for permission to be normal. Eventually the youngest breaks the spell. "Did you really climb a mountain with a man named Griswold?" You nod. "And shared a blanket with a raccoon." This is true. You left that part out of the ledger. It felt like overkill. The laughter is genuine, warm, the tension softens, talk turns to politics, reform art. The eldest daughter grills you about unions again. You surprise her by agreeing. Your wife blinks when you say the bathroom wallpaper is too much. The staff nearly faints when you request a simple dessert of pears and nothing that's been set on fire. After dinner, you bring out the ledger. Not to read aloud, just to show them. "I've been writing things down," you say. "Not the business, the rest of it." They take turns flipping through it. No commentary, no judgment, just reading. Your daughter looks up. "Is this what legacy means to you?" You consider the question, then say, "It does now." They leave slowly that night. No declarations, no grand reconnections. But your wife squeezes your hand at the door. The eldest pats your shoulder like she's almost proud. The youngest steals the pawn again. The next morning you surprise the staff again, this time by walking to the factory. Walking, no carriage, no horses, just your boots, the city, and a quiet sense that for once no one needs to see you coming. On the way, you pass through neighbourhoods that once seemed like background. Now they breathe around you. A child kicks a can into the gutter. A woman haggles over onions. A man with no shoes whistles a tune you swear you knew in another life. At the factory gates, the workers glance up. There's a pause. No one expects you. Especially not on foot. You don't give a speech. You don't tour the floor like a monarch. You just look and nod. And leave a note with the foreman to implement the better ventilation system you vetoed last spring. No explanation. You walk home slower than you arrived. Here's your historical fact. Some Gilded Age tycoons did eventually change. Quietly, subtly. A few donated anonymously. Some rebuilt cities after disasters. One famously spent the last years of his life visiting every employee who'd ever worked for him, handing out small checks and asking for their stories. Your fringe detail. One millionaire, upon turning 60, burned his original will, built a dance hall for orphans, and legally changed his middle name to Mercy. His family hated him for it. The orphans did not. And here's the scholarly debate. Can men of great power become gentle without losing their edge? Can steel soften without rusting? Is change truly possible, or just repackaged performance? You don't pretend to know, but that night you write in the ledger, dinner, real talk, family still semi-functional. A win, and beneath it, factory, walked there, no crown, no audience, didn't hate it. You stare at the page for a long time, then add, ledger may end soon, but the story doesn't. The pen rests softly in your hand. For once, the weight feels shared. This is the part where everything glows, not in a literal sense, though there will be lights, an obscene number of candles, and at least one chandelier that physically cannot stop spinning, but in that surreal, soft focus way life sometimes takes on when you know you've done something utterly insane and there's no turning back. Because tonight, you're throwing the party of the century. The invitations were handwritten. Not by you, of course. Your calligrapher nearly passed out halfway through the final batch. They were scented with lavender, sealed in wax, and delivered via footmen in crimson uniforms designed specifically for the event. If that sounds excessive, then congratulations. You're finally beginning to understand yourself. The theme? A night among the gods. Subtle? You're not. Guests were instructed to dress as figures from myth, legend, or the pages of unreasonably poetic literature. You wanted them magnificent, unhinged, and, most importantly, desperate to outshine one another. Competition makes everything sparkle harder. The mansion has been transformed. The grand ballroom now features actual clouds suspended from the ceiling, billowy constructions of silk wire, and just enough dry ice to fog your reputation. A string quartet floats in a gondola over the reflecting pool. The ice sculptures are taller than some countries and anatomically generous. And yes, there's an elephant. Why? Because once you've gilded your bathroom, reality becomes negotiable. Guests begin arriving at dusk. They descend from carriages, steam-powered contraptions, and even one hot air balloon that nearly crashed into your chimney. Masks shimmer. Capes swirl. One baroness arrives dressed as Cleopatra and trailing a snake named Horace. He bites 2 people. No one complains. You greet them all. Smile, laugh, kiss hands, shake gloved fingers, absorb compliments like a sponge dipped in praise. Somewhere in the corner, a scandalous poet dressed as Dionysus is already weeping into a fruit tart. You make a note to avoid him, and then the music begins. Not just a waltz, no, that would be predictable. This is a mash of orchestral flourishes and tribal drums, sound so decadent it should be illegal in several countries. Dancers swirl in figures that are definitely traditional and possibly cursed. Someone lights 100 candles with a single breath, someone else loses a shoe, finds a lover and forgets both names by morning. You take your place at the centre of it all, not on a throne, but something close, a curved settee shaped like a crescent moon, hovering just above the ballroom floor on a clever platform rigged by your favourite illusionist. You look out over the sea of movement, lace and powdered wigs and feel for a moment untouchable. But of course it can't last. Nothing this gold ever does, because somewhere near midnight the clock stops ticking. Not metaphorically, it literally stops. The grand clock above the fireplace, imported from Prague, powered by gears forged in your own factories, just quits. A single quiet click, then silence. People don't notice at first, but you do. It's not just a mechanical failure, it's a sign. You excuse yourself quietly, slipping away through a side hall, letting the laughter and champagne-coated chaos fade behind you. You climb the stairs, one slow step at a time until you reach your study. You open the ledger. You stare at the last page and write, "The party is perfect. The party is a warning." You close the book. Your reflection in the window shows a man in a white velvet jacket with embroidery so fine it could buy a town. Your face is tired, beautiful in a haunting sort of way. You imagine this is how fallen angels look in the moment they decide to stop apologizing. Here's your historical fact. Gilded Age tycoons threw parties so grand they make modern galas look like bake sales. Entire orchestras hidden behind walls, tables of oysters and champagne served on mirrored floors. One railroad heiress threw a ball where each guest had to arrive dressed as their zodiac sign. She later claimed she couldn't remember it because she accidentally drank the moon. Your fringe detail? A lesser-known copper magnate once hosted a masquerade where every guest received a key. At midnight, each key unlocked a box. Only one contained a deed to a 5-acre estate in upstate New York. No one found it was in the wrong box. He lost track. The land is still technically owned by a man dressed as a satyr named Bernard. And here's the final scholarly debate. Do these parties mark the peak of a culture, or its pre-collapse fever dream? Are they legacy, or last gasp? You sit in silence for a long while, then downstairs the music swells again. The orchestra has shifted into something soaring, something defiant. Your guests continue to whirl like stars on a tether. The elephant is waltzing with a duchess. You smile. Because you know this isn't about escape, it's a performance. One final luminous act before the lights dim. You rise, smooth your sleeves and return to the ballroom. Everyone cheers, you bow, and for a moment you let yourself believe this will be the thing they remember. Not the lawsuits, not the mines, not the toilet seat, but this. A night where gods danced, where time stopped, where everything glittered just a moment too long. You dance, you drink, you forget. And outside, beyond the gates, the sentry turns quietly in its sleep.